Chapter 444. Far away on the sea, the emperor hound carried Yi Xian as it ran. At this moment, the emperor hound's speed had reached its limit. Yi Xian sat cross-legged on the emperor hound's back, his hands on his knees as he madly absorbed purple origin crystals. Healing. He had used up a lot of energy in the previous battle, especially when he had activated the prison pagoda. Although he had not fully activated it, it had affected him to a certain extent. The emperor hound suddenly said, "Kid, is there something coming out of your body?" Yi Xian nodded. The emperor hound said, "Is it hard to deal with?" Yi Xian smiled bitterly. Deal? If it was easy to deal with, the sword would not have left. Now that the sword had left, there were 3 less swords in the pagoda. He did not know what would happen, the woman in the plain dress. He had to admit that he missed the woman in the plain dress a little. As if thinking of something, Yi Xian's face darkened. Dependence. In that instant, he had thought that if the woman in the plain dress had come, she would have been able to resolve this crisis. That was the truth. However, Yi Xian could not rely on the woman in the plain dress. He would not allow himself to rely on others. Once a person became dependent, they would become lazy. Everything depended on oneself. Yi Xian took a deep breath. He opened his palm and a sword appeared in his hand. It was the celestial spirit sword. Looking at the sword in his hand, Yi Xian smiled slightly. "I have to rely on myself." The emperor hound suddenly said, "Kid, you are ambitious. In that case, can you let me go?" Yi Xian's face darkened. Haha, the emperor hound suddenly laughed loudly. "Kid, if you don't have any other way out, I have one. Do you want to hear it?" Yi Xian said, "What way?" The emperor hound said, "Don't you have a way to hide your aura?" Yi Xian nodded. "Yes. However, they have locked onto me, so I cannot use this secret technique." He had long wanted to use the primal chaos to conceal himself, but someone had been following him and the monarch hound closely. Therefore, there was no point in concealing his aura now. The emperor hound said, "I have a way to put some distance between us to give you some time." Yi Xian looked at the emperor dog and asked, "What do you mean?" The monarch hound didn't say anything. Suddenly, it roared furiously, and in the next moment, its speed increased explosively. Everywhere it passed, space was torn apart. It was obvious to see how fast it was. The moment the emperor hound disappeared, a shadow suddenly flashed across the sky. Its speed was also extremely fast, but it was still slightly slower than the emperor hound. Soon, the distance between the emperor dog and the afterimage widened. 15 minutes later, the emperor hound stopped on an island. As soon as it stopped, it collapsed. Yi Xian's expression changed. Just as he was about to speak, the emperor hound suddenly said, "Hide. Don't waste time." After saying that, it slowly closed its eyes. Yi Xian didn't waste any time and directly stored the emperor hound in the prison pagoda. In the next moment, he used the primal chaos qi to completely conceal himself. At this moment, it was as if his entire person had disappeared into thin air. There was no aura at all. Less than 3 breaths after Yi Xian disappeared, a shadow suddenly flashed over Yi Xian's head. In the darkness below, Yi Xian didn't move. Not long after, the remnant figure suddenly retreated. His divine consciousness was like a giant net that enveloped the entire island. Yi Xian also sensed his opponent's divine consciousness. At this moment, he even stopped breathing. At this moment, he even held his breath. A moment later, the divine sense disappeared, and the afterimage in the sky also disappeared. But Yi Xian still didn't choose to leave. About half an hour later, several black shadows suddenly flashed across the sky. Each of the black shadows had an extremely powerful aura. At the very least, they were above the Saint realm. Sensing this, Yi Xian's expression became extremely solemn. Who the hell wanted to mess with him? Such a big battle formation. Just like this, after the sky turned dark, Yi Xian quietly left the place. But this time, he didn't choose to use sword kinesis flight in the sky. Using sword kinesis flight now was undoubtedly courting death. Take the water route. Yi Xian dived into the sea and slowly moved forward. He didn't dare to go too fast. Those people in the dark were not ordinary people. If he made a little movement, he was afraid that he would be noticed. Although it was a little slow, safety was the most important. Somewhere in the sky, a purple-robed middle-aged man stood in the air. This person was the mysterious human king. In front of him, there were 4 shadows. These 4 shadows were faintly discernible and extremely strange. After a moment, the human king suddenly said, "Completely disappeared?" In front of him, a shadow nodded, disappeared without a trace, without any aura. The corner of the human king's mouth slightly raised. Interesting. The shadow said in a deep voice, "Human king, what should we do now?" The human king said with a smile, "His goal is to go to the Great Sky Burial Wall. And to enter the Great Sky Burial Wall, he must go through the burial gate. That is the only way to the Great Sky Burial Wall. You go there first and wait for him." The 4 shadows nodded slightly, and in the next moment, they disappeared into thin air. The human king turned to the side, "Go to the stargazing gate and say that I want to borrow the heart-viewing mirror." "Forget it, I will go personally." As his voice fell, he turned and took a step forward. With this step, his whole person disappeared. Under the sea, Yi Xian found a cave at the bottom of the sea. He sat down cross-legged and directly entered the prison pagoda. In the first floor, the emperor hound was lying on the ground with its eyes closed. Its aura was still there, but he found that the emperor hound's body had shrunk. Needless to say, the emperor hound must have used some secret technique or divine ability. Now, it was also suffering from a backlash. At this time, Soul's voice suddenly sounded, "Young lord, don't worry. It is only in a deep sleep, it is not a big deal." Yi Xian said softly, "Soul, were the Nether clan very strong in the past?" Soul said, "Very strong. If young lord was in the Nether clan, you would only be considered average." "No, only average." Yi Xian's face was full of black lines. "I didn't ask you that." Soul said, "Oh." After a moment, Yi Xian said, "Why am I only considered average in the Nether clan?" Soul said softly, "Because the martial arts civilization is different. The Nether clan's martial arts civilization is much higher than this star field's. Just like young lord, you have barely come into contact with laws, divine abilities, and innate divine abilities. As for secret techniques, ancient spirit methods, as well as the laws of earth, heaven, starry sky, and all things, young lord has not come into contact with them. And in the Nether clan, people are taught these knowledge from birth." Yi Xian shook his head and sighed. He really understood why the emperor hound was so arrogant. Because it was really powerful. Compared to them, this star field had already lost from the beginning. The environment. Many times, the environment was too important. At this time, Soul said, "Young lord is also not bad. To be chosen by this pagoda, young lord must be outstanding, but I haven't found anything outstanding about young lord." Yi Xian's face was full of black lines. "Soul, in your eyes, I don't have any merits? Is that so?" Soul was silent for a long time, and then said, "In fact, it's not that there aren't any." Yi Xian quickly asked, "What merits?" Soul said softly, "Young lord is very thick-skinned, this is also considered a merit." Yi Xian's expression froze, and after a moment, he said seriously, "Soul, no one talks like this." With that, he left the prison pagoda and continued forward. On the way, Soul suddenly said, "Young lord, this star field civilization is too low level, I suggest young lord go to a more civilized star field. This way, young lord can come into contact with a higher civilization's martial arts, which is of great benefit to young lord." Yi Xian shook his head, "I still haven't understood the martial arts of this star field." Soul said softly, "That's true." Yi Xian suddenly asked, "The Nether race and the God race are such powerful martial arts civilizations, why did they disappear?" Soul said, "There is always a sky beyond the sky, there is no strongest, only stronger. Yi Xian shook his head with a smile. The martial arts, there is no limit. Soul said, that's right, the martial arts road has no end. Just like before, I thought it was the world's most powerful sword, but now. Yi Xian said with a smile, is it because of those 3 swords at the top of the pagoda? Soul said, yes, but I'm not bad, I will work hard to surpass them. Yi Xian said with a smile, you have ambition, let's work hard together. With that, Yi Xian gradually sped up. 3 days later, Yi Xian went ashore. In front of him was a mountain range that stretched as far as the eye could see, and from time to time, the roar of wild beasts could be heard. After passing through this mountain range, he would reach the Great Wall of Burial Heaven. Yi Xian looked around, but there was nothing around. But he knew that those people in the dark would certainly not give up like this. A moment later, Yi Xian quietly sneaked into the dense forest. As soon as he entered the dense forest, the sky suddenly darkened because the forest was so dense that not even sunlight could penetrate. In the dense forest, Yi Xian quietly sneaked, but soon, his face became solemn. Because he found that the demon beasts in this mountain range were really strong. Not long after, he had already encountered several Sage Realm level demon beasts. This was not a good place. Yi Xian was more and more certain that this Great Wall of Burial Heaven was definitely not a good place. In order to avoid trouble, Yi Xian avoided those demon beasts along the way. About an hour later, Yi Xian came to a small river. He glanced at the river, and the next moment, the entire river suddenly boiled. Just as Yi Xian's face changed, and he was about to leave, the small river in front of him suddenly exploded. At this moment, a man rushed out from the bottom of the river, and he landed steadily on the shore, causing the entire ground to shake violently. In the man's right hand, there was also a demon beast's head dripping with blood. The man's upper body was bare, and he wore tight-fitting cloth pants. But Yi Xian found that the man's upper body was covered in scars. At this moment, the man suddenly looked at Yi Xian, and when he saw Yi Xian, he was slightly stunned. Qi-controlling realm? Are you kidding me? Yi Xian smiled slightly. Excuse me, how do I get to Great Wall of Burial Heaven? The man walked in front of Yi Xian, and he sized up Yi Xian. You want to go to Great Wall of Burial Heaven? Yi Xian nodded. The man said seriously, are you sure you're not here to be funny? Yi Xian. P.S. I'm sorry, I did something stupid today. I moved the internet, but not the computer. I have a desktop, and I can't connect to the internet with my phone, so I had to quickly move the computer. I'm really sorry. I won't be so stupid again. Chapter 445. The man sized up Yi Xian again. Suddenly, he frowned. You have some skills. Only then did he realize that Yi Xian in front of him had no aura at all. He couldn't feel it at all. Yi Xian smiled. How should I address you, sir? The man said, War Army. Yi Xian smiled. Yi Xian. The War Army said, Yi Xian. Are you hiding your realm, or? Yi Xian smiled. Hiding my realm. The War Army nodded slightly. No wonder. Brother Yi, did you just come from Neverending City? Yi Xian nodded. Just arrived. The War Army smiled. Let's go. I'm about to go back too. With that said, he turned and walked into the distance with Yi Xian. On the way, the War Army suddenly said, Brother Yi, have there been any geniuses in Neverending City recently? Yi Xian smiled. Why do you ask? The War Army shook his head and sighed. Because there have been fewer and fewer people coming to the Great Wall of Burial Sky in the past 2 years. Yi Xian asked, Are you training here? The War Army shook his head. Not really. Yi Xian asked, Why do you say so? The War Army pointed into the distance. Over there is the Moke clan's place. Have you heard of the Moke clan? Yi Xian nodded. A little. The War Army said softly, you will soon see how terrifying they are. This clan is a group of battle maniacs. And their goal is to conquer Neverending Star Domain. Yi Xian frowned slightly. Conquer Neverending Star Domain? The war army nodded. This is the final barrier. If we lose it, they will march straight into the Neverending Star Domain. That will be a disaster for the Neverending Star Domain. Yi Xian said in a low voice, don't the people of Neverending Star Domain know? The war army said softly, I know. Every year, many people come from there. They are all geniuses from various forces. But in the past 2 years, there have been fewer people. As he spoke, he shook his head and laughed. I heard that a genius appeared in the Moke clan, called Wuxia. This person has already rushed to the Great Wall of Burial Sky. When that time comes, this place will definitely be very lively. Yi Xian asked, won't the experts of the older generation participate? The war army said with a smile, of course not. It's just that this is not the final battle. Therefore, both sides have an agreement to let the younger generation of both sides have some fun. Actually, it's a kind of training. Both sides are training their soldiers. Of course, it's to see which side's soldiers are stronger. As he spoke, he looked at Yi Xian. Brother Yi, no matter how monstrous you are outside, when you come here, remember one thing. There is no most monstrous genius here, only more monstrous geniuses. Especially don't look down on anyone, especially people from the Moke clan. Yi Xian nodded slightly. Thank you for the reminder. The war army smiled and was about to speak when he and Yi Xian suddenly stopped. The ground beneath their feet was shaking. Yi Xian frowned and looked into the distance. At that moment, the war army said in a low voice, demon beasts are approaching here. Yi Xian was just about to say retreat when the war army said excitedly, let's go and see. Yi Xian was speechless. Just like that, the war army took Yi Xian and rushed forward. After a while, Yi Xian's expression gradually became dignified because there were deep and huge footprints on the ground where they passed. It was not an ordinary demon beast. The war army took a closer look at the footprints, and soon, his expression became dignified. What's wrong? Asked Yi Xian. The war army said in a deep voice, it should be a violent beast. I can't beat it alone. As he spoke, he looked at Yi Xian. Are you interested? Yi Xian asked, what are the benefits of fighting this thing? The war army smiled and said, there are great benefits. First, their blood and nidin can strengthen our bodies. Here, only strong strength can allow us to survive. Second, their skin can be exchanged for a lot of purple source crystals. Because we need to consume a lot of purple source crystals every day, we can improve our strength better with purple source crystals. As he spoke, he looked at Yi Xian. This violent beast is at the peak of the Sage Realm. Its combat power is extremely strong. Its blood and nidin are great supplements. Its skin can be sold for at least 100,000 purple source crystals. 100,000 purple source crystals. The corner of Yi Xian's mouth twitched slightly. Originally, he was still interested, but now, he basically had no interest. Although he had sent most of the purple source crystals to Azure Firmament World, he still had at least 10 million purple source crystals on him. Therefore, he was not short of money. The war army suddenly said, Brother Yi, if I'm not wrong, you should have brought a lot of purple source crystals with you when you came, right? Yi Xian did not hide it. Yes, I have some. The war army laughed. Let me tell you, very soon, you will not even have a single strand of hair on your body. Yi Xian was puzzled. Why? The war army smiled and said, because the consumption here is very high. Moreover, we need a lot of purple source crystals for our daily cultivation because there is no spirit energy on Burial Sky Great Wall. If we want to cultivate, we can only rely on purple source crystals. Yi Xian said solemnly, the never-ending starfield does not provide help. The war army said softly, of course they do. Everyone gets some allowance every month, but not much. This is because Burial Sky Great Wall has a huge array that requires hundreds of millions of purple source crystals to maintain every month. Also, in short, there are too many places to spend purple source crystals. Therefore, most of the time, we can only rely on ourselves. Yi Xian said softly, "Is the Moke clan very strong?" The war army smiled bitterly. "Not very strong, but very strong." Saying that, he looked at Yi Xian. "Brother Yi, how about it? Have you thought it through? Let's get rid of this violent beast together." Yi Xian smiled. "Then let's give it a try." The war army laughed. "Let's go." After saying that, he rushed forward at an extremely fast speed. Yi Xian hurriedly followed. Soon, the two arrived outside a dense forest. In the distance, the two saw a giant beast by the river. This giant beast was like a small mountain, drinking water by the river. Looking at this size, the corners of Yi Xian's mouth twitched slightly. "This is too big." Zhang Jun suddenly leaped, and like an arrow released from a bow, he directly collided with the nearby violent beast. Yi Xian was stunned. This guy attacked just like that. He was about to make a move, but suddenly, he looked down at the ground. The next moment, his expression changed. At this moment, the violent beast in the distance suddenly turned around, and the next moment, it slammed its palm toward the war army. The war army did not dodge and blasted a punch. Boom! With a loud explosion, the war army retreated several hundred feet. After he stopped, he was about to make a move. At this moment, the ground around him suddenly cracked. Soon, 3 beasts the size of the violent beast climbed up from the ground. They were all in the sage realm. Seeing this scene, the war army's expression suddenly changed. He was ambushed. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly appeared beside him. Seeing Yi Xian, the war army was stunned and then said, "You're not running?" Yi Xian did not come out just now. He could have run away. Yi Xian smiled and said, 3 against 1, you're dead for sure. 3 against 2, we still have some hope. What do you think? The reason why he did not run was naturally because he felt that this war army was a good person. If he ran away at this time, it would be a bit immoral. The war army glanced at Yi Xian, "You're quite an interesting guy." Yi Xian smiled and then looked at the violent beast in front of him. At this moment, the violent beast was also staring at him. Yi Xian opened his palm, and a sword appeared in his hand. The war army was slightly stunned. "Brother Yi, are you a swordsman?" Yi Xian nodded. The war army was about to speak, but at this moment, the violent beast in the distance suddenly leaped. Seeing this scene, Yi Xian and the war army's expression changed, and the two of them flashed backward. Boom! The violent beast landed on the ground, and the place where the two of them were originally standing collapsed. At this moment, several sword flashes directly slashed its body. Chi chi chi. The sword flashes directly tore open a few wounds on the violent beast's body, and blood splattered everywhere. Yi Xian was about to continue attacking, but at this moment, the giant beast next to him suddenly slapped its palm over. When this palm fell, it was as if the sky had collapsed, and it immediately darkened. The war army next to him stomped his right foot, and his whole body soared into the sky. In the air, the war army punched the giant beast's palm. Boom! The giant beast immediately retreated, but the war army also directly smashed to the ground, creating a huge deep pit. On their right, another giant beast suddenly rushed toward them. Every time this giant beast landed, the ground trembled violently. It was extremely terrifying. The war army suddenly said, "These two little ones, and the old one, which one do you want to fight?" Yi Xian looked at the violent behemoth in front of him. "Leave this one to me." As soon as he finished speaking, he disappeared. The next moment, several sword chi suddenly slashed the violent behemoth's body, and for a moment, countless streams of blood splattered from the violent behemoth's body. Because the speed of Yi Xian's flying swords was too fast, the violent behemoth could not stop them at all. Therefore, it directly abandoned defense and then slapped Yi Xian in the air. This palm was extremely powerful, and as it swept across, the surrounding space trembled violently as if it was about to collapse. Seeing this scene, Yi Xian's expression changed slightly. He did not choose to fight head-on, because he absolutely could not. He decisively dodged this powerful blow, and at the same time, he gently slashed forward. In an instant, countless sword chi slashed the violent behemoth's body from various angles. For a moment, several streams of blood splashed from the violent behemoth's body. Guerrilla warfare. Yi Xian kept dodging in the air. Every time he dodged, his flying swords could cut a few wounds on the violent behemoth's body. In just a short while, the violent behemoth's body had already been cut dozens of times. About 15 minutes later, the violent behemoth suddenly roared angrily. Thinking that the other party was angry and was about to use a big move, Yi Xian's expression changed. He was about to dodge, but at this moment, the violent behemoth suddenly turned around and ran. The other two demonic beasts also turned around and ran. Yi Xian was stunned. That motherf asterisk cur ran away? Next to Yi Xian, the war army smiled bitterly. Your sword can break through its defense, but if it continues, it will definitely die. Even if it doesn't die, it will be seriously injured. Here, being seriously injured is equivalent to death, so it chose to run. At this point, there was a sudden change. A beam of golden light suddenly appeared above their heads, and in the next moment, that beam of golden light directly enveloped Yi Xian. Soon, in the distant sky, the space trembled as if something was shuttling back and forth. Yi Xian's face sank. Brother Jean, you go first. As soon as his voice fell, four phantoms suddenly appeared in front of them. They were all above the Saint Realm. Seeing this scene, the war army's expression also changed. Brother Yi, this is? Yi Xian said, my enemy, you go first. The war army said solemnly, Brother Yi, do you think they will let me go? Yi Xian smiled bitterly. Sorry, I implicated you. The war army suddenly took out a talisman. The next moment, that talisman directly turned into a golden light and soared into the sky. Yi Xian was puzzled. This is? The war army said, call more people. Yi Xian thought for a while and then said, please call more people. Otherwise, I will panic a little. The war army. Chapter 446. The four phantoms in front of Yi Xian did not make a move. They seemed to be waiting for something. Beside Yi Xian, the war army suddenly asked, Brother Yi, what faction are they from? Yi Xian shook his head. I don't know. The war army was about to speak when a middle-aged man in a purple robe appeared in front of them. It was the human lord. The human lord was holding a pure white mirror in his hand. The main character was here. Yi Xian clenched his right fist, and the mystic qi in his body began to circulate. The human lord looked at Yi Xian and smiled. I have to say, your concealment technique is indeed impressive. If I hadn't borrowed the mind visualization from the stargazing sect, I wouldn't have been able to find you. Yi Xian said in a low voice, how should I address you, Your Excellency? The human lord smiled. They all like to call me human lord. As for our origins, I can only tell you that we are not from the never-ending star domain. As he spoke, he walked to a spot not far from Yi Xian and said, Yi Xian, hand over that treasure, and I will leave your corpse intact. How about that? Yi Xian smiled. I thought you would say that you would let me live if I hand over that treasure. The human lord shook his head. You are truly a monster. People like you will be a huge problem if they grow up. So, I have to kill this trouble here. Yi Xian was silent, as if he was considering it. The human lord suddenly shook his head and smiled. Are you still trying to stall for time? At that moment, a phantom beside him suddenly whispered something. Soon, the human lord looked at the war army beside Yi Xian. Are you from the Great Wall of Sky Burial? The war army nodded. The human lord smiled. This has nothing to do with you. You may leave now. The war army looked at Yi Xian, and Yi Xian smiled. Brother Zhan, you may leave first. The war army was silent. Yi Xian smiled and said, this is my personal matter. I'm already very sorry for dragging you into this. There's really no need for you to stay here, because it's meaningless. The war army was silent for a moment and then said, take care. With that, he turned around and disappeared into the distance. Yi Xian looked at the human sovereign. The human sovereign smiled and said, look, this world is very realistic. Yi Xian smiled and said, I think it's very normal. This is my personal matter. Why should I let others die with me? Human sovereign nodded slightly, your mentality is not bad. As he spoke, the shadow behind him suddenly vanished, and then a rift was torn open in the space here. The moment the phantom disappeared, Yi Xian's expression changed. He clenched his right hand and 5 qi swords quietly condensed in front of him. The next moment, the 5 qi swords ruthlessly slashed down. Boom! An explosion suddenly resounded, and then the 5 qi swords directly shattered. Yi Xian retreated rapidly, and while he was retreating, several more shadows quietly appeared around him. Danger! At this moment, Yi Xian smelled the scent of death. He didn't dare to be careless. Yi Xian stomped his right foot and directly put on the god set. At the same time, he suddenly drew his sword and slashed. Draw the sword to decide life and death. The sword slashed down, and the shadow in front of him was instantly slashed back. However, Yi Xian felt several powerful forces blasting his body. Boom! Yi Xian was directly sent flying. At this moment, he felt like his entire body was about to collapse. Just as he was about to stop, the shadows appeared around him again. A black sword suddenly appeared in Yi Xian's hand. The next moment, he held the sword and slashed horizontally. A black sword light violently vibrated. Not far away, the human king's voice suddenly rang out, retreat. As soon as the word fell, the 4 shadows around Yi Xian suddenly disappeared. When they appeared again, they were already behind the human king. Yi Xian's sword missed. The human king glanced at the sword in Yi Xian's hand and softly said, this sword of yours. Amazing. Yi Xian wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and grinned, is that so? The human king suddenly disappeared. In the distance, Yi Xian suddenly slashed down with his sword. Boom! As soon as the sword fell, Yi Xian's entire body was directly sent flying. In the distance, the human king faintly smiled, killing a genius is quite a sense of accomplishment. As he spoke, he was about to attack again, but at this moment, his brows suddenly furrowed. He looked behind Yi Xian. There, 6 people were rushing over, and the one leading them was the war army. Seeing this scene, the human king's eyes suddenly slightly narrowed. The war army rushed in front of Yi Xian. He glanced at Yi Xian who was lying on the ground. Brother Yi, are you still breathing? Yi Xian was just about to speak when blood suddenly flowed from his mouth. He smiled bitterly. This time, he really was beaten to the point where he couldn't fight back. At this time, Soul's voice suddenly rang out, young lord, don't belittle yourself. This person's strength far exceeds yours. He has already surpassed the manifestation realm. He is simply not someone you can match. Yi Xian was silent. No matter what, this time he was bullied badly. Not far away, the human king glanced at the war army and the others. These people were all in the sage realm. The geniuses buried in the Great Wall. The human king looked at the war army. Your Excellency, what do you mean? Next to the war army, a bald man suddenly said, Dog army, didn't you say that they are all in the sage realm? This is the F*King sage realm? They are all in the manifestation realm. And as he spoke, he pointed at the human king not far away. This guy might be above the manifestation realm. You told us that they are all in the sage realm. If you have any dissatisfaction with us, just say it. You can't trick us like this. The war army smiled apologetically. There is no difference between the sage realm and the manifestation realm. The bald man's face twitched. There is no difference? How can you say that? Not far away, the human king suddenly said, "Everyone, our target is only this Yi Xian. Please leave." He didn't dare to kill these geniuses of the Great Wall of Sky because doing so would be equivalent to angering the entire never-ending starfield. After all, most of these geniuses came from the various major factions of the never-ending starfield. Killing these people was equivalent to directly confronting the never-ending starfield and never-ending palace. The war army glanced at the human king, then looked at the bald man beside him. "Baldy, that guy is at least above the manifestation realm. Do you want to fight him?" Baldy was silent for a moment, then said, "War army, who is that guy lying on the ground? Is he worth our brothers risking their lives for?" The war army smiled bitterly. "I just met a guy called Yi Xian. When I was ambushed by 3 violent beasts, he didn't choose to escape. Instead, he stayed to help me. So, in terms of character, there should be no problem." Baldy asked in a low voice. "I don't know him, but since you said you want to save him, then I will." With that, he took a step forward. The next moment, a huge pitch-black ruler suddenly appeared in his hand. At the same time, he pointed a finger at his chest. In an instant, a powerful aura swept out of his body. Then, he leaped up and landed directly on the human king's head. He slammed the ruler down. Sky-splitting ruler. The ruler fell, and the world seemed to be split apart. Below, the human king was expressionless. He raised his hand and waved. Boom! Baldy instantly retreated 1,000 feet, but the human king didn't retreat a single step. However, on the back of his hand, there was a deep mark of a ruler. The human king glanced at the back of his hand, then looked at the nearby Baldy. He said softly, "I have to say, the quality of the geniuses of this great wall of buried heavens is quite high." With that, he suddenly disappeared. In the distance, the expressions of Baldy and the others changed. In the next moment, the 6 of them rushed out. The human king's eyes gradually turned cold. In the next moment, he spread out his palm and pressed it forward. In an instant, the space in front of him rippled like a wave. In front of him, Baldy and the war army were instantly pushed back by this powerful force. The bodies of Baldy and the war army directly cracked, and blood splattered everywhere. The human king's eyes were filled with killing intent. He didn't choose to hold back anymore. He once again rushed towards Baldy and the war army. At this moment, the sound of a flute suddenly came from the side. In the next moment, the space in front of the human king exploded. The human king stopped and turned to look. Not far away, a middle-aged man in a white robe was slowly walking over. In the middle-aged man's right hand was an emerald green flute. Seeing this middle-aged man in white, the human king's face instantly darkened. The white-robed middle-aged man stopped not far from the human king. He looked at the human king and the others. Scram! The human king was about to speak, but at this moment, a black shadow suddenly appeared behind the human king and the others. In the next moment, 2 illusory figures' heads were directly sent flying. Blood spurted out like a fountain. The human king stared at the white-robed middle-aged man. "I guess you must be the famous Mr. Bai." The white-robed middle-aged man looked at the human king. "Not Scram." As his voice fell, a ghostly black shadow suddenly appeared not far behind the human king and the others. This black shadow was holding a long blood-red sickle in his hand. The human king was silent for a moment. Then, he looked at Yi Xian, who was lying on the ground not far away. "We will meet again." As his voice fell, he and the 2 illusory figures behind him directly disappeared. Mr. Bai turned to look at Baldy and the others not far away. 3 months of salary forfeiture, 1 month of cleaning the Great Wall. The faces of Baldy and the others immediately became bitter. Beside them, the war army said weakly, "Mr. Bai, did we do something wrong?" Mr. Bai glanced at the war army. The latter smiled awkwardly. I'm just asking. It's okay if you don't want to say, Mr. Bai said. Your duty is to guard the Great Wall of Burial Sky. Baldy hurriedly pointed at Yi Xian on the ground. He also belongs to our Great Wall of Burial Sky. Mr. Bai glanced at Yi Xian and said indifferently, he hasn't entered the Great Wall of Burial Sky yet. So, he doesn't count now. As he said this, he looked at the war army. Are you dissatisfied with my punishment? The war army hurriedly shook his head. No, no. I'm very satisfied, very satisfied. Mr. Bai said, after he wakes up, let him go to Golden Palace and not come out for a month. As he said this, he quietly disappeared with the illusory figure not far away. Golden Palace. In the field, Baldy and the others looked at each other and then looked at Yi Xian on the ground. In their eyes, there was pity and a trace of schadenfreude. Chapter 447. After Mr. Bai left, the war army and the others carried Yi Xian away. After the war army and the others left, the human king who had left earlier appeared once again. Looking in the direction where Yi Xian and the others had left, the human king's expression was frighteningly gloomy. In the end, Yi Xian still entered the Great Wall of Burial Skies. But now, he could not do anything. Because even he could not deal with the Great Wall of Burial Skies. Moreover, if he continued to attack, he would not only have to face Yi Xian alone, but also the entire never-ending starfield. In the same place, the human king was silent for a moment before he said softly, those above the Saint Realm cannot attack. That's good. I want to see if Yi Xian is really invincible among those of the same level. As soon as he finished speaking, his entire body disappeared. After the human king disappeared, a black shadow carrying a sickle suddenly appeared not far away. The black shadow looked up at the end of the horizon and was about to give chase when a voice suddenly sounded. Don't chase after him. The black shadow nodded slightly, turned around, and disappeared. The scene returned to normal. After an unknown period of time, Yi Xian felt pain all over his body. At that moment, a voice sounded in his ear. You're awake? Yi Xian endured the pain all over his body and sat up. However, as soon as he sat up, the tearing feeling in his body made him gasp. Beside Yi Xian, the war army said, don't move first. Your entire body has been shattered. You need to recover. Yi Xian smiled bitterly. This time, his injuries were really serious. Without thinking much, he took out some purple source crystals and began to devour them. As the energy of the purple source crystals entered his body, his injuries began to slowly heal. The war army said in a low voice, Brother Yi, who were those people just now? Yi Xian shook his head. I don't know either. The war army said, from now on, if there is nothing else, go to the Great Wall of Burial Skies. He was also wary of the strength of the human king and the others just now. Yi Xian nodded. I won't go out for the time being. As he spoke, he looked around. This is the Great Wall of Burial Sky? The war army smiled and said, yes, now you are in my stone house. After you recover, you can go out and see the Great Wall of Burial Heaven. As he spoke, he picked up the broom at the side and said, I still have something to do. You recover first. After that, he carried the broom and left the stone house. Inside the stone house, Yi Xian sat cross-legged on the ground in silence. The previous battle had made him understand that his current strength was far from enough. That's because the ones who attacked him were likely some old monsters. Moreover, his intuition told him that with the existence of this pagoda, his future enemies would only grow stronger. Not only that, but there was also a huge problem within the tower, especially the 5th floor. The 5th floor really wanted to kill him. And the best way to deal with the 5th floor was to find the Tao Law and use it to suppress the 5th floor. The problem was that he had no clue where to find the 5th Tao Law. Where could he find it? At the thought of this, Yi Xian felt a headache coming on. As the woman in the plain dress had said, the prison pagoda had brought him endless benefits, but at the same time, it would also bring him endless troubles. Blessings and misfortunes were intertwined. Yi Xian shook his head and didn't think about this problem for the time being. His priority now was to heal his injuries. About 2 hours later, his body was slightly better. Looking at his body that still had some cracks, Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. The human king from before was really terrifying. An expert of this level was still not someone he could fight. Improve his strength. Yi Xian took a deep breath. He had to improve his strength as soon as possible. After resting for about an hour, Yi Xian slowly walked out of the stone house. He wanted to see the Great Wall of Burial Sky. After Yi Xian walked out of the stone house, a heat wave hit him in the face. It was very hot, and his skin felt a burning pain. Apart from that, the heat wave also carried a lot of sand. What was this place? Yi Xian frowned and quickened his pace. Soon, he came to the side of the city wall. He raised his head and saw a wasteland in the distance. He couldn't see the end of it. To his left and right, the city wall was like a huge dragon spiraling around, and he still couldn't see the end of it. Under his feet, it was 300 yards tall. Behind him were some scattered stone houses. There weren't many, only a few dozen. Not far behind the stone houses, he could faintly see some tombstones. There were quite a lot of them. Great Wall of Burial Sky? Yi Xian was silent. This Great Wall of Burial Sky was different from what he had imagined. It was very desolate, and there was a sense of oppression. At this moment, a man walked to a place not far from Yi Xian. It was Baldy. The Baldy sized up Yi Xian, and then he said, "Feeling better?" Yi Xian smiled faintly. "Better. Also, thank you for earlier." When Baldy and the rest came, he hadn't fainted yet. Therefore, he still remembered the person in front of him. Baldy said indifferently, "Go to Roland's Golden Palace to clean up." This is what Mr. Bai requested. Roland's Golden Palace? Yi Xian was stunned. What place? Baldy said, "You'll know when you get there." As he said that, he pointed to the right. Walk 200 yards from here. After saying that, he turned and left. Yi Xian suddenly said, "Can I not go?" Baldy didn't even turn his head. "Sure, as long as you can defeat Mr. Bai." "And, that's right, those people who chased after you were chased away by Mr. Bai." Yi Xian, after a moment, Yi Xian shook his head and sighed. He then walked towards that whatever Roland's Golden Palace. Now that he couldn't beat them, he had to keep a low profile. Not long later, Yi Xian arrived. The so-called Roland's Golden Palace was simply too different from what he had imagined. The so-called Roland's Golden Palace was just a huge wooden shed. The top of the wooden shed was empty and there was a foul stench coming from inside. If it wasn't for the words Roland's Golden Palace written on the door, he would definitely think that he had come to the wrong place. At this moment, an elder walked out from inside and sized up Yi Xian. "You're the newcomer, Yi Xian?" Yi Xian nodded. "That's me." The elder said indifferently, "Clean up." Yi Xian was a little confused. "Clean up what?" The elder pointed to the Roland's Golden Palace not far away. The feces of the demon beasts inside. Yi Xian's face instantly darkened. Clean up the feces of the demon beasts? Himself? The elder took a look at Yi Xian. "Why, you don't want to?" Yi Xian hurriedly nodded his head. The elder sneered. "Newcomer, let me give you a word of advice. Don't challenge the authority of Mr. Bai. Otherwise, you will be very, very miserable." After saying that, he turned around and left. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly said, "Senior, please wait." As he said that, he hurriedly walked in front of the elder. The elder was expressionless. "What do you want?" Yi Xian took out a storage ring and handed it to the elder. He smiled. "I'm new here, so this is a small token of my appreciation. I hope that senior will accept it." The elder took a glance at the storage ring and said coldly, "Are you trying to bribe me?" Yi Xian said solemnly, "No, no, definitely not. This is just a small token of appreciation from Junior, a small token of appreciation." The elder looked at Yi Xian and his eyes gradually turned cold. "What kind of person do you think this old man is?" Yi Xian thought for a moment and then took out another storage ring. There were 200,000 purple origin crystals in it. The old man flew into a rage when he saw this scene, and he was just about to speak when Yi Xian took out another spatial ring. There were 500,000 purple origin crystals in the spatial ring. The elder was stunned. In the next moment, he silently put away the storage ring and said indifferently, "Old man, seeing that you are still injured, it is indeed not suitable for you to do such heavy work. Forget it, this old man will let others do it. However, you must remember that this old man is not opening a back door for you. This is just understanding that you are injured, understand?" Yi Xian hurriedly said, I understand. I will keep a very, very low profile during this period of time." The elder nodded slightly and turned around to leave. Yi Xian immediately breathed a sigh of relief. He lay down on the side and shook his head with a smile. The charm of money is indeed great. At this moment, Shaolinger suddenly ran out. Yi Xian was stunned. Just as he was about to speak, Shaolinger threw herself into his arms and said in a trembling voice, Fifth floor. Yi Xian frowned slightly. He sank his consciousness into his body and his face quickly darkened. The door to the 5th floor opened. Is he going to come out? Yi Xian was dumbstruck where he stood. Chapter 448. It had to be said that Yi Xian was also a little nervous at the moment. The 5th floor. When Jian Zizai left, he told him to be careful of the 5th floor. Obviously, Jian Zizai was also a little afraid of the 5th floor. Moreover, from the looks of it, the 5th floor was not ordinary. Even the sword at the top of the tower could only temporarily suppress it. One could imagine how terrifying it was. If the other party came out now, he would definitely be the unlucky one. However, after Yi Xian waited for a moment, there was no movement at the exit of the 5th floor. What was going on? Yi Xian was a little confused. Was it going to come out or not? After a long time, there was still no movement at the entrance. In Yi Xian's arms, Shaolinger blinked, then looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian asked, "Are you afraid?" Shaolinger nodded vigorously. Yi Xian said seriously, "I'm here, don't be afraid." Shaolinger said softly, "But you can't beat that guy." Yi Xian was speechless. Shaolinger rested her chin on her hands and sighed. "What should I do?" Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. He gently rubbed Shaolinger's little head. "If the sky falls, I will hold it up first, understand?" Shaolinger looked at Yi Xian. After a moment, she said quietly, "Actually, I also have a very powerful thing." As she said this, she took out a small box. Yi Xian was stunned. "This is?" Shaolinger hugged the small box tightly and grinned. "This box is very powerful. If the 5th floor comes out to bully us, I will use this to kill it." Yi Xian smiled. "Okay." Shaolinger nodded her little head, then returned to the prison tower. She glanced upstairs and hugged the box tightly with her two little hands. Outside. After Shaolinger entered the World Prison Pagoda, Yi Xian's smile gradually disappeared, and his expression became somewhat solemn. He discovered a problem. His greatest enemy was not the people outside, but the 5th floor, or rather, the World Prison Pagoda. Against the enemies outside, he could still run if he couldn't beat them. But against this World Prison Pagoda, he didn't even have the chance to run. Sigh. Yi Xian sighed softly and returned to the stone house of the war army. He sat cross-legged on the ground and continued to heal his injuries. Right now, the most important thing was to completely heal his injuries and then display his strength. About 4 hours later, Yi Xian's body had basically returned to normal. He sat cross-legged on the ground, and soon, several chi swords appeared around him. These chi swords quickly condensed into a single sword, and in the next moment, this sword silently disappeared, fast, so fast that even he could only see a blurry trail. However, Yi Xian still shook his head. Slow down. This speed was extremely fast for an ordinary sage state expert. However, it was far from enough for a fate state expert. He had to be faster. How could he improve? Yi Xian sat cross-legged on the ground for a long time. Finally, he suddenly took out the Space Tao Law. Ever since he had cultivated in adversity, he had rarely used the Great Tao Law and the Space Tao Law. Now, he suddenly recalled what Yan Jia had said before. The power of the Tao Law had infinite potential. If there was potential, he naturally had to unearth it. The core of the Space Tao Law was space. However, he knew very well that he had not fully grasped the understanding and control of space. The Space Tao was not as simple as it seemed on the surface. Research space. Yi Xian made up his mind. If he wanted to increase the speed of his sword, the only way to do so was to use space. This was because he had already used his qi to the extreme. If he wanted to improve further, he could only use space. Space. Yi Xian stood up and walked out of the stone house. He was a little lost as he looked outside. He had already reached the levitation realm before and had a certain level of control over space. However, at this moment, he realized that the little bit of space he had once understood was, this chapter is not over. Please continue to the next page. How shallow. Space. He couldn't see it, but he could feel it. Yi Xian closed his eyes and calmed his mind. After around an hour, he seemed as if he had entered a meditative state without any distracting thoughts in his heart. Sense space. Space couldn't be seen, but it could be felt. Moreover, he could sense space even more clearly through the Space Tao Law. Moreover, he could even utilize the space in the surroundings through the Space Tao Law. Of course, once one attained a certain level of cultivation, one could utilize space even without the Space Tao Law. However, Yi Xian noticed that the difference in effect between utilizing and not utilizing the Space Tao Law was at least 10 times greater. At this moment, he could sense how terrifying the Space Tao Law was even more clearly. So, what he had to do now was to fuse his sword with the Space Tao Law. Around 2 hours later, a sword of energy silently appeared here. In the next moment, the sword of energy suddenly flew out, and it vanished at the instant it flew out. When it appeared again, it was on the city wall that was 300 m away. Spatial travel. Yi Xian was quite excited. Because the speed of the sword of energy would become slightly faster after utilizing space. However, it consumed quite a bit of energy because he still had to control the energy of space. It had become faster, but it consumed more energy as well. Yi Xian fell silent on the spot for a moment, and then he continued studying it. The path of cultivation was boring. Just like that, an entire day passed. At dawn on the next day, Yi Xian had tried all sorts of methods. Even though he was able to increase the speed of the sword by quite a bit, the problem was that he hadn't been able to resolve the problem of energy consumption. Moreover, the speed wasn't fast enough to satisfy him. He'd fought creation realm experts in the past, so he was very clearly aware of how formidable they were. If one's speed wasn't fast enough, then it would be utterly impossible to pose a threat to a creation realm expert. Moreover, his current Heavenren drawing technique was unable to kill a creation realm expert. Of course, if it was a one-on-one battle, then he wouldn't be very weak even if he went against a creation realm expert. However, it wouldn't be very weak if a creation realm expert fought him as well. Yi Xian continued studying it as if he'd gone mad. Just like that, time slowly passed by. On the other hand, the war army and the others hadn't returned during these past few days, and it was unknown where they'd gone. Yi Xian didn't choose to go out either. Instead, he hid in the stone house and studied the Space Tao Law crazily. After his unremitting efforts, he finally gained something. That was to use the Space Tao Law to allow his sword to become one with space. Previously, he'd used his sword to travel through space to achieve an unexpected effect, but now, he chose to let his sword become one with space. The difference was that when he traveled through space, the Qi sword and space were separated. He needed to control both Qi and space at the same time, which was very strenuous. On the other hand, to become one with space, he only needed to control space because the sword was directly integrated with space. The sword was the space, and the space was the sword. Apart from that, there was another advantage to doing this, and that was that his Qi sword went from being tangible to intangible. The intangible Qi sword was even more mysterious and unpredictable. Of course, it wasn't an extremely simple task to fuse the energy swords with space. Fortunately, he had the support of the spatial Tao laws. So, it wasn't too difficult for him. All he had to do now was practice. Practice like crazy. 2 days later, the war army suddenly walked into the stone house, and there were several bloodstains on his body. Yi Xian was stunned. "What's the matter?" The war army grinned. "I fought with the Moke clan once, but I didn't lose out. I tore off one of their arms." Yi Xian said in a deep voice, "The Moke clan is here?" The war army shook his head. "I don't know why, but the Moke clan hasn't made any moves recently. This time, we took the initiative to look for them." Speaking up to this point, he glanced at Yi Xian. "Are your injuries healed?" Yi Xian nodded. "They're almost healed." The war army said in a deep voice, "Brother Yi, there's something I don't know if I should say." Yi Xian smiled. "What's there to not say? Just say it." The war army nodded. "You've been here for a while. You have to do something. Here, you won't be respected if you don't have strength. This chapter is not over. Please turn the page." Yi Xian smiled bitterly. "What do I want to do?" The war army smiled. "Do you want to do something with me and Baldy later?" Yi Xian asked, "What's the matter?" The war army said, "You'll know later. Let's go." After saying that, he turned around and left. Yi Xian quickly said, "Aren't you going to heal your injuries?" The war army laughed. "This injury is nothing." Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. Then, he followed. Soon, Yi Xian and the war army saw Baldy. Baldy glanced at Yi Xian. "Let's go." After saying that, he turned around and leaped, landing directly on the ground below the city. Yi Xian and the war army also quickly followed. The three of them ran all the way and soon disappeared at the end of the distant plain. On the city wall, a middle-aged man in a white robe quietly looked at the three people in the distance. That man was none other than Mr. Bai. After a while, Mr. Bai said softly, "That treasure. Palace Master, why did you send this jinx here? Do you think I'm too idle?" At this time, a man in black holding a sickle appeared behind Mr. Bai. The man in black said, "Sir, during this time, there are some unknown people peeping around the Great Wall." Mr. Bai nodded. "Got it." The man in black said, "Do you want to get rid of them?" Mr. Bai shook his head. "With that kid here, these flies can't be eliminated." As he said that, he looked up at the end not far away. "If he can't make a contribution and is mediocre, I will personally send him away. This is not his refuge." The man in black said in a deep voice, "What if this kid is good?" Mr. Bai smiled. "He is my talent. I should protect him well and let him grow well. Let's see his performance for the time being." After saying that, he turned around and left. The man in black also disappeared quietly. In the distance, Baldy led the war army and Yi Xian into a swamp, and the three of them ran all the way. Soon, Baldy stopped. On the mountain wall not far in front of them, there was a dark blue tree. On the tree, there were 4 dark blue fruits. Yi Xian was a little puzzled. "This is?" The war army grinned. "This is a kiwi fruit. After eating it, it can enhance the physique. It is equivalent to a dragon's blood tempering the body. It's a good treasure." Yi Xian said, there's danger, right? Zhang Jun looked at Yi Xian. Of course. In a place like this kind of treasure is either reserved by someone or guarded by a powerful monster. Yi Xian glanced around and found nothing. His expression became dignified. Because this place was not simple. Baldy suddenly said, I'll go get it. You guys help me watch both sides. The war army suddenly said, I'll go. Baldy said calmly, are you faster than me? The war army wanted to say something, but Baldy shook his head. I'm faster. I have a better chance. After saying that, he was about to go. At this moment, Shaoling suddenly appeared in front of Yi Xian. The war army and Baldy were stunned. Yi Xian was also stunned. The next moment, under everyone's gaze, Shaoling had already appeared in front of the kiwi tree. In the blink of an eye, Shaoling appeared in front of them again. In front of them, there was also the kiwi tree. Shaoling grinned. It's mine. After saying that, she directly carried the kiwi tree and disappeared. The three of them, at this moment, the mountain in front of the three of them suddenly collapsed. Soon, a figure flashed out of it. This figure was extremely fast and went straight to Yi Xian and the others. Baldy and the war army looked dignified. The war army said in a deep voice, it's Ghost Man, the general of the Moke clan. P.S. An author met with a reader and got his A*S*X burst. Now it's going viral in the circle. I want to ask weekly. You shouldn't have any dirty thoughts about me, right? End of this chapter. Chapter 449. The Ghost Man was extremely fast, and in the blink of an eye, he was in front of the three of them. At that moment, Baldy suddenly rushed out and smashed down with his ruler. The Ghost Man did not dodge and punched Baldy's heavy ruler. Boom! The ground under their feet directly cracked, and at the same time, the two of them retreated rapidly. Yi Xian was about to attack when the war army suddenly said, let them fight. Yi Xian looked at the war army, and the war army said in a low voice, we can't let the Moke clan look down on us. Yi Xian was speechless. Baldy grinned from not too far away, and it was a slightly savage smile. In the next moment, he leaped forward. At the same time, the enormous ruler in his hand suddenly turned completely red, and the ghostly figure in front of him suddenly charged forward at an extremely swift speed. Everywhere he passed, space trembled violently, and it was an extremely astounding sight. Soon, the two of them approached each other. Baldy held the heavy ruler with both hands and slashed it down. As the ruler fell, a terrifying flame swept down from the tip of the ruler. However, the ghostly man did not dodge at all. Instead, he threw out a punch. It was pure physical strength. With one punch, the space trembled. Boom! This punch directly shattered the flame, and at that moment, the heavy ruler in Baldy's hand smashed fiercely on the ghost man's fist. Boom! The surrounding space trembled violently, and the two of them retreated rapidly. Seeing this scene, Yi Xian's expression became solemn. The strength of Baldy and the ghost man was beyond his expectations. At that moment, he also understood that he was actually not the strongest among the younger generation in the heaven domain. The geniuses of the entire never-ending starfield might be here. This was really a gathering place for monsters. And most importantly, these monsters were extremely strong in actual combat. Right at this moment, the ghost man suddenly slammed his palms on the ground, causing the entire ground to tremble. Then, an earth spike shot into the sky from beneath Baldy's feet. Baldy's face changed. He stomped his right foot and pulled backwards. Before he could land, another earth spike shot out from the ground. Baldy's eyes flashed with malevolence. He swung his great sword downwards. Boom! The earth spike instantly shattered. At this time, the ghost man suddenly appeared in front of Baldy. He fiercely punched Baldy in the chest. Baldy was instantly sent flying. However, the moment he was sent flying, the heavy ruler in his hand fiercely smashed into the ghost man's chest. Bang! Ghost Man was also sent flying in an instant. The two of them landed on the ground almost at the same time, and the ground where they landed directly cracked open. In the distance, the Ghost Man struggled on the ground for a while and tried to get up. Seeing this scene, Yi Xian's face darkened. This was because the Ghost Man's body had already cracked open, but the opponents still wanted to fight? Not far away, Baldy also slowly got up. The Ghost Man looked at Baldy with an expressionless face. There was only murderous intent and fighting spirit in his eyes. Just as the Ghost Man was about to attack again, a voice suddenly sounded from the side. "That's enough." Hearing this voice, the Ghost Man hurriedly stopped. But the expressions of Yi Xian and Warsky changed, especially Yi Xian. He deeply frowned because he didn't sense anyone approaching. Yi Xian and Warsky turned around. Not far from them stood a man in his 20s. The man was wearing a green robe and had his right hand behind his back. He had a tranquil and indifferent temperament. And behind the man on the left stood an extremely burly man. The man's upper body was naked, and his arms were crossed. The muscles all over his body were bulging, full of explosive power. And behind the man in the green robe stood another man. This man's figure was the complete opposite of the burly man on the left. This man's figure was especially petite, like a woman's figure. He wore a loose robe, and his hands were hidden in the robe. Seeing these three people, the war army next to Yi Xian's face darkened, and Baldy's expression also became ugly in an instant. Yi Xian said softly, "You know them?" The war army stared at the two people behind the man in the green robe. These two people are the Mok clans Tian Sha and Di Sha. They are extremely strong, and usually we don't see them. Speaking up to this point, he slightly paused and then said, "These two people have the strength to kill a Fate Realm expert. Moreover, this was a year ago. As for now, killing a Fate Realm expert." Yi Xian's expression became solemn. He looked at the two people again. They looked very young, about the same age as him, but they could already kill a Fate Realm expert. As if thinking of something, Yi Xian looked at the man in the green robe in front of the two people. "Who is this person?" The war army shook his head. "I don't know him." At this moment, the man in the green robe walked in front of Yi Xian and the other two people. His gaze fell on Yi Xian. "Swordsman?" Yi Xian frowned slightly. The other party actually knew that he was a swordsman. The man in the green robe was about to speak, but at this moment, he turned his head and looked into the distant sky. Soon, he frowned. After a moment, he turned and walked into the distance. Beside him, Tian Sha, Di Sha, and Gue Ren hurriedly followed. Not long after, the man in the green robe suddenly stopped. He turned and looked at Yi Xian and the other two people. The next moment, he gently stomped his right foot. Boom! The space around Yi Xian and the other two people collapsed. In an instant, Yi Xian and the other two people retreated nearly 1,000 feet. After Yi Xian and the other two people stopped, the war army and Baldy immediately spat out blood from the corners of their mouths. However, Yi Xian was fine. The man in the green robe's gaze fell on Yi Xian. He was a little surprised. "You're interesting." After saying that, he turned and disappeared not far away. He left in a hurry. Looking in the direction in which the man in the green robe and the other two people disappeared, Yi Xian's expression was also solemn. In that instant, he had felt the other party's spatial power. However, the other party was too fast. He was so fast that the space around him had already collapsed before he could use the Space Tao law. This was not the main point. The main point was that the other party could shatter space so easily. Not only was he fast, but he was also extremely strong. At that moment, the war army next to Yi Xian suddenly said in a low voice, "Another genius has appeared in the Mok clan. Moreover, this person's strength is obviously above the Heaven Sha and Earth Sha. I just don't know if it's the legendary Xia." At the side, Baldy said in a low voice, "No matter what, we have to go back and tell Fatty Tang about this." This time, the Moke clan has been quiet for too long. It's really not normal. After saying that, he turned and left. The war army looked at Yi Xian. Let's go. Yi Xian nodded. On the way, Yi Xian's mood was a little heavy. Before this, he felt that his opponents were the older generation. Basically, no one in the younger generation was a match for him. However, after coming to Burial Sky City, he realized that there were too many strong people in the younger generation. Just like the man in the green robe just now, he was not confident that he could defeat him. However, he was not discouraged. There was only fighting spirit. Boundless fighting spirit. He, Yi Xian, did not seek to be invincible among the younger generation, but to be undefeated among the younger generation. After a while, Yi Xian and the others returned to Burial Sky Great Wall while the war army left. Baldy and Yi Xian returned to the stone house. Inside the stone house, Baldy sat cross-legged on the ground and began to heal. Yi Xian did not choose to disturb the other party, but he soon discovered a problem. When Baldy was healing, he used ordinary spirit stones instead of purple source crystals. Yi Xian asked, "Why not use purple source crystals?" Baldy glanced at Yi Xian. "No." Yi Xian flicked his finger and a storage ring landed in front of Baldy. Baldy glanced at it and saw that there were 100,000 purple source crystals inside. However, Baldy shook his head. "I know that you've just arrived and have some stock on you. However, this stock won't last long in this place because you'll soon find that there are too many places where you'll need purple origin crystals, so keep them for yourself." Yi Xian smiled. "Use them first. We'll talk about it when it's not enough." Baldy still wanted to refuse, but Yi Xian suddenly said, "Baldy, if you think that I'm a person worth befriending, then accept it." Baldy glanced at Yi Xian. He hesitated for a moment before putting away the storage ring. 100,000 purple origin crystals was just the right amount to solve his urgent need. Especially now that his salary had been suspended by Mr. Bai, these 100,000 purple source crystals were still very important to him. Baldy began to absorb the purple source crystals. He glanced at Yi Xian. "There are two people here that you can't offend. The first is Mr. Bai, and the second is Fatty Tang. We'll meet them later, understand?" Yi Xian said with a smile, "Are there fights here, too?" Baldy shook his head. "There aren't too many struggles, but the people here are very arrogant. Do you understand what I mean?" Yi Xian nodded. He naturally understood that the people here were all top monsters, and as monsters, they must be very arrogant. At this moment, the war army walked in. He glanced at Yi Xian and said, "Fatty Tang wants to see you." Baldy frowned slightly. After a moment, he stood up. "Let's go." Yi Xian nodded and followed him. After a while, Yi Xian, the war army, and Baldy arrived at a stone house. This stone house was very big, several times bigger than the war army's stone house. After entering the stone house, the smell of meat wafted over. There were 7 people in the stone house, 5 men and 2 women. The leader was a fat man with a very big body. Yi Xian knew that this person should be Fatty Tang. Fatty Tang was sitting on the ground, eating a leg of lamb. His mouth was covered in oil and he did not have any image at all. The people next to him were also sitting and eating. The war army walked over. "Brother Tang, my brother is here." Fatty Tang ignored Tang Jun and continued to gnaw on the leg of lamb in his hand. The war army was a little embarrassed. He smiled and looked at Yi Xian and Baldy. "Wait." Baldy nodded, but Yi Xian did not say anything. Just like that, under the gaze of the 3 people, Fatty Tang finished eating the leg of lamb. At this moment, he picked up another leg of lamb in front of him and started gnawing on it. Seeing this scene, the faces of the war army and Baldy sank a little, but neither of them said anything. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly walked forward. At this moment, the war army quickly pulled him back. He looked at Yi Xian and shook his head. Yi Xian smiled slightly. "I can't help it. I can't stand it with my bad temper. As soon as he said that, a sheathed sword suddenly appeared in his left hand. The next moment, he drew the sword and slashed forward. Boom! The entire stone house collapsed with a loud bang. Chapter 450. The place suddenly quietened down. War Army and Baldy were shocked. Neither of them had expected Yi Xian to suddenly make a move. In their impression, Yi Xian was a quiet and mild-tempered person. Not far away, Fatty Tang put down the lamb leg in his hand and looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian was expressionless and very calm. Yi Xian was not a person who liked to cause trouble, but he was very clear about one thing. In this world, the strong were respected. Only the strong could be respected by others. Just like in the secular world, if a person was not capable, not to mention outsiders, the first people to look down on him would be his family and relatives. However, the three of them were not respected here. He did not like this feeling. This was how Yi Xian behaved. If you respect me, I will respect you. If you don't respect me, why should I respect you? At most, I will just fight. Fatty Tang got up and walked toward Yi Xian. At that moment, War Army and Baldy walked to Yi Xian's side. Fatty Tang stared at Yi Xian. This stone house costs at least 1 million purple source crystals. Of course, for you, I want 10 million purple source crystals. Yi Xian smiled faintly. I'm afraid you won't have the life to collect it. Haha. Upon hearing Yi Xian's words, the people behind Fatty Tang suddenly burst into laughter. Their laughter was very exaggerated, as if they had heard the funniest joke in the world. At that moment, a space Dao law suddenly appeared between Yi Xian's brows. The next moment, an energy sword quietly pressed against the forehead of a man on the right. This man was the one who had laughed the loudest earlier. At that moment, the place quietened down. The smiles on those people's faces also disappeared at this moment. Yi Xian looked around at the people around him. Is it funny? Is it funny? The man who was pinned down by Yi Xian's chi sword stared at Yi Xian. His expression was extremely unsightly. Because he had been very relaxed just now, he was almost unprepared. Because of this, he was pinned down by Yi Xian's sword. In front of Yi Xian, Fatty Tang looked at Yi Xian and was about to speak when Yi Xian suddenly looked at him. Do we fight here or outside? Fatty Tang smiled and said, of course it's here. As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly blasted his fist towards Yi Xian's face. The moment the punch was thrown, Yi Xian immediately felt a powerful force envelop him. This fist force gave him a feeling that he couldn't block it. But this feeling disappeared as soon as it appeared. Yi Xian suddenly drew his sword and slashed. Sword drawing determined life and death. The moment the sword was drawn, a powerful sword force instantly blocked Fatty Tang's fist force. The next moment, the sword directly collided with Fatty Tang's fist. Bam! Yi Xian instantly retreated hundreds of feet. Fatty Tang did not move at all. However, an energy sword was stuck in his chest. The sword was not inserted deeply, but it still went in. The place quietened down again. At that moment, the faces of the people behind Fatty Tang suddenly turned serious. They were very clear about Fatty Tang's strength and physical body. They did not expect Yi Xian's sword to be so fast that Fatty Tang could not dodge it. A sword with this speed was a great threat to them. War Army and Baldy were also a little surprised. They did not know much about Yi Xian's strength. They only knew that Yi Xian was a swordsman. But now that they saw Yi Xian's sword, they realized that the guy in front of them was much more powerful than they thought. Fatty Tang pulled out the energy sword from his chest. The next moment, he held the energy sword in his hand and threw it at Yi Xian. Shing! A tearing sound suddenly rang out in the field. The energy sword stopped in front of Yi Xian. The next moment, it turned around and slashed directly at Fatty Tang, who was not far away. At that moment, Fatty Tang rushed forward and blasted out a punch. Boom! The energy sword instantly shattered. Fatty Tang's fist did not stop. It went straight for Yi Xian. Yi Xian did not stop. The moment the energy sword flew out, he suddenly disappeared. The next moment, countless energy swords appeared in the field, and these energy swords slashed at Fatty Tang, who was not far away from them from different angles. For a time, the field was filled with sword energy. Yi Xian did not choose to fight Fatty Tang head-on. It was not that he did not dare to, but he knew very well where his strengths and weaknesses were. He was not stupid enough to use his weaknesses to face his opponent's strengths. Fatty Tang was extremely powerful, and every punch could shatter Yi Xian's energy swords. However, Yi Xian's energy swords depended on qi. As long as there was qi around him, his swords would be endless. Therefore, every time Fatty Tang shattered Yi Xian's energy swords, countless energy swords would slash at him. The most terrifying thing was that these energy swords could break through Fatty Tang's body. After fighting for a while, Fatty Tang was suppressed by Yi Xian's flying swords, and he was at a disadvantage. But soon, Fatty Tang suddenly stomped his right foot, and a powerful force swept out from his body. Then, he stretched his right hand forward, and in the next moment, he slammed his fist upward. Boom! The entire sky shook violently, and in an instant, Yi Xian's countless flying swords turned into nothingness. At the same time, Fatty Tang suddenly leaped up and slammed directly into Yi Xian in the air. In the air, Yi Xian brought his hands together, and countless energy swords quietly condensed in front of him. In the next moment, these energy swords suddenly slashed out, and in an instant, the charging Fatty Tang was directly drowned by these energy swords. There was a moment of silence. Boom! The energy swords shattered, and then a fist arrived in front of Yi Xian and slammed straight at Yi Xian's chest. Yi Xian did not dodge. Instead, he slashed at Fatty Tang's head with an energy sword. A life for a life? Below, everyone's expression changed. Was he playing with his life? In the air, Fatty Tang's fist slammed into Yi Xian's chest, while Yi Xian's sword slashed at Fatty Tang's head. But at this critical moment, Fatty Tang tilted his head and dodged the fatal sword, but Yi Xian's sword slashed directly at his shoulder. Bang! Swoosh! The two instantly separated. Yi Xian retreated nearly 100 feet, while Fatty Tang retreated more than 100 feet. But as soon as he stopped, an energy sword suddenly pierced his chest, and another energy sword slashed at his throat, but he caught it with his right hand. However, an energy sword quietly appeared behind him at an extremely fast speed, and instantly pierced his back. At the same time, countless more energy swords kept appearing around him. Seeing this scene, everyone nearby felt their scalps go numb. The speed of these flying swords was too unpredictable. At this moment, not far away, Fatty Tang suddenly roared. The next moment, an illusory golden armor appeared on his body. As the golden armor appeared, Yi Xian's flying swords immediately dissipated when they slashed at the golden armor. Seeing this scene, the faces of those who were following Fatty Tang turned gloomy. They did not expect Yi Xian to force Fatty Tang to use one of his trump cards. In the distance, Yi Xian did not make another move. He looked at Fatty Tang and asked, using external objects? As soon as his voice trailed off, a sword suddenly appeared in his hand. Soul-suppressing sword. The moment the sword appeared, the corner of Fatty Tang's eyes twitched. Behind Fatty Tang, a man suddenly stood up and stared at Yi Xian. Fatty Tang did not use any external objects. This golden armor is a divine ability that he cultivated. It's not considered an external object. Yi Xian pondered for a moment and then put away the soul-suppressing sword. To be honest, if he used external objects, he was confident that he could kill even a Blessed Realm powerhouse in an instant. Of course, this was not because he was strong, but because the soul-suppressing sword was. This sword was too strange. Even he had no way to deal with it. Seeing Yi Xian put away the soul-suppressing sword, the man not far away immediately breathed a sigh of relief. With one look, he could tell that this weapon was at the Blessed Realm. If Yi Xian used this treasure, he would really be playing with his life. Why did you stop fighting? At this moment, a voice suddenly came from the side. Hearing this voice, everyone's expression changed. They turned to look and saw a man in white standing not far away. Mr. Bai. When they saw this person, Fatty Tang and the others quickly bowed slightly. Greetings, Mr. Bai. Yi Xian was not stupid. He also quickly bowed slightly. Greetings, Mr. Bai. Mr. Bai glanced at Fatty Tang and Yi Xian. Continue fighting. Fatty Tang did not dare to speak. Yi Xian smiled sheepishly. It's just a sparring match. Mr. Bai looked at Yi Xian. Sparring? Yi Xian nodded. Yes, it's just a sparring match. Mr. Bai nodded slightly. All right. Agui, spar with him. As soon as Mr. Bai's voice fell, a black shadow suddenly appeared in front of Yi Xian. Yi Xian's expression changed, and he dodged backward. However, just as he retreated, the black shadow appeared in front of him again. The next moment, he felt a sharp pain in his abdomen, and his entire body flew backward. After flying for a few feet, Yi Xian felt his right leg being grabbed. The next moment, he fell from the sky and landed heavily on the city wall. Bang! The entire city wall shook violently. At this moment, Yi Xian felt like his entire body was about to shatter. However, it was not over yet. He felt himself being lifted up. At this time, Yi Xian suddenly roared, and the next moment, countless energy swords appeared around him. Soon, the black shadow disappeared, and Yi Xian felt relieved. However, the next moment, the black shadow appeared in front of him again, and the energy swords around him had disappeared without a trace. Yi Xian suddenly drew his sword and slashed. The sword fell, but it cut through empty air. The black shadow appeared behind him without him knowing. The next moment, he felt as if his back was hit by a hammer, and his entire body flew forward. The moment Yi Xian flew out, several energy swords slashed behind him at an extremely fast speed. When those energy swords arrived in front of the black shadow suddenly disappeared, and when it reappeared, it was already in front of Yi Xian. Bang! Yi Xian flew out again, and this time, the black shadow appeared tens of feet away, holding 3 flying swords in his hand. It was the energy swords released by Yi Xian just now. Its speed could no longer be described with words. At this time, Little Soul's voice suddenly sounded in Yi Xian's mind, "Young lord. Give up struggling, you can't beat him." Yi Xian, seeing Yi Xian being completely abused, not far away, Fatty Tang and the others suddenly laughed. At this time, the black shadow suddenly continued to appear in front of Fatty Tang. Fatty Tang's face changed drastically, and just as he was about to attack, a fist directly hit his abdomen. Poof! Fatty Tang flew out instantly, and soon, the black shadow lifted Fatty Tang's foot and smashed him on the city wall. Everyone's scalp tingled. After a moment, the black shadow casually threw Fatty Tang directly next to Yi Xian. The two of them lay like corpses, and neither moved. They could not move. Mr. Bai glanced at the two of them. Aren't you good at fighting? Get up and continue fighting. Fatty Tang suddenly got up, pointed at Yi Xian, and said angrily, "I don't accept this, he attacked first, it was him." Bang! Fatty Tang flew out, flying far away. At this time, Yi Xian also slowly got up, and everyone looked at Yi Xian. The black shadow was about to attack, but Yi Xian suddenly raised his hands. I admit my mistake," the black shadow stopped. Everyone. P.S. Can I ask for a vote? Chapter 451. Hearing Yi Xian's words, everyone was stunned. Admit his mistake. Everyone was a little confused. Admit his mistake just like that? Mr. Bai glanced at Yi Xian and turned to leave. The black figure named Agui also disappeared quietly. Everyone in the surroundings looked at each other. Yi Xian sat down. At this moment, he felt like his whole body was broken. Now, thinking about the black figure named Ague, he still had a lingering fear. The other party crushed him in all aspects. He crushed him without any suspense. This kind of person was too terrifying. At this moment, War Army and Baldy walked to Yi Xian's side. Both of them glanced at Yi Xian and War Army asked, "Are you okay?" Yi Xian smiled bitterly. "I won't die." War Army chuckled. "It's good that you won't die. Speaking of which, Brother Yi, you're really good at fighting." "Really good at fighting?" Yi Xian shook his head. "If I'm good at fighting, I wouldn't have been beaten up like this." Baldy and War Army's expression suddenly became a little strange. Yi Xian asked, "What's wrong?" War Army smiled bitterly. "Brother Yi, do you know who hit you just now?" Yi Xian shook his head. War Army said in a deep voice, "Ague." Yi Xian asked, "What's his background?" War Army smiled bitterly. "We've seen him fight before. He killed Fate Realm powerhouses like killing chickens. Let's put it this way, Fate Realm powerhouses don't even have the power to fight back in front of him. Not only that, it's said that he was the first batch of people to guard this great burial wall and the first batch to fight with the Moke clan." As he spoke, his voice became softer. Among that group of people, there were very, very few who survived. Baldy nodded. "Ague is the best fighter here. As for Mr. Bai, we've never seen him fight. Among the younger generation, the one with the best fighting ability is Shui Bai. However, he is often not here and we rarely see him. Other than him, there's Zhou Xingxing, and then there's Fatty Tang. Of course, Brother Yi should also be ranked on the list." "Himself?" Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. "I still need to work hard." When he fought Fatty Tang just now, he could feel that his opponent did not give it his all. That was normal. Neither of them had truly risked their lives just now, so it was naturally impossible for them to reveal all of their trump cards. At this time, the War Army said again, "Brother Yi, our real enemy is the Moke clan. They are the most terrifying." Moke clan. At this moment, Yi Xian thought of the man in green again. That man's strength was also unfathomable. Moreover, Ague and Mr. Bai were so strong, but all these years, the never-ending Starfield could only defend, and they were at a slight disadvantage. One could imagine how powerful the powerhouses on the Moke clan's side were. Here, he truly felt a sense of crisis. At this moment, Fatty Tang and the others walked over from not far away. Fatty Tang glanced at Yi Xian and did not say a word. He turned around and left with the others. Behind Fatty Tang, the people also glanced at Yi Xian, but there was no hostility in their eyes. That included Fatty Tang. Although he had fought with him earlier, he did not have any killing intent on him. He did not have the intention to kill him. This surprised Yi Xian. As if he knew what Yi Xian was thinking, the War Army suddenly said, "It's normal to have small fights here, but once we go out, we will all be comrades because everyone knows that our real enemy is the Moke clan." At this point, he paused slightly and continued, "Back then, there was a super genius who was as famous as Shui Bai. Both of them were extremely monstrous, but that person's killing intent was too strong, and he was too competitive. He was also extremely strong, and his talent could be described as terrifying. Later on, that person was personally killed by Mr. Bai." Yi Xian was puzzled. "Why?" The War Army looked at Yi Xian. "Because she was too vicious. Because she did not like someone, she directly crippled that person. Not only that, but she also twisted that person's head." Shui Bai stopped her. She fought with Shui Bai for a day outside the city. When Mr. Bai came back, he punished her. She was not satisfied and fought with Mr. Bai. Naturally, she could not win, but she did one thing. "What?" Yi Xian asked. The War Army said in a deep voice, "That time when we fought with the Moke clan, she deliberately did not make a move, causing 5 of our people to be killed by the genius of the Moke clan. This is too serious." Hearing this, Yi Xian was silent. The war army looked at Yi Xian. Brother Yi, I don't have much contact with you, but I can feel that you are also a hot-tempered person. Here, you must not be too ruthless, especially to your own people. Yi Xian smiled and said, if others do not kill me, I will not kill them. He, Yi Xian, was not that kind of cruel and violent person. Just like in the battle with Fatty Tang did not kill him, and he did not kill him. Of course, if someone wanted to kill him, then, whether the other party was from the Moke clan or the never-ending Starfield, he, Yi Xian, would kill him without hesitation. The war army nodded. Here, everyone still needs to be united. Otherwise, after going out, no one will survive. Baldy suddenly said, don't worry. Brother Ye's brain is better than yours. The war army thought for a moment and said with a smile, that's true. He did not forget that Yi Xian apologized at that time. They would never do such a thing because it was too shameful. At that time, even if they were beaten, they had to bear it. But Yi Xian directly apologized. After a while, Yi Xian and the other two left. On the other side, Mr. Bai stood on the city wall. He looked ahead, a trace of worry in his eyes, and no one knew what he was thinking. Beside him was a Gui, whose true form could not be seen. After a moment, Mr. Bai suddenly asked, what do you think of him? A Gui pondered for a moment, then said, his foundation is above average, his kendo is a little special, and he is taking an unusual path. Mr. Bai said, what about his personality? A Gui was silent for a moment, then said, he is a little hot-tempered, and he fights with all his might. His close combat and actual combat skills are not bad, he is a ruthless person. Then, he looked at Mr. Bai, are you afraid that he will be the second her? Mr. Bai nodded. I have looked up his information. This person has been very decisive since he came from Qingcheng. I should say that he is ruthless. He has never shown mercy to his enemies, the kind that shows no mercy. A Gui said, he is flexible. Mr. Bai said with a smile, are you talking about the time when he cried out that he was wrong? A Gui nodded. I didn't expect that either. Mr. Bai said with a smile, I didn't expect that either. As he said that, he turned his head to look at the end of the horizon and said softly, I hope he is not the second her. Yi Xian returned to the war army's stone house. Healing. Yi Xian sat cross-legged on the ground and began to crazily devour purple origin crystals. In his mind, he was still thinking about the battle with Fatty Tang. The battle with Fatty Tang made him understand that he still had some shortcomings, especially in close combat and physical strength. Although his physical body had been tempered by dragon blood, it was still much weaker than Fatty Tang. He could not even compare to the war army, let alone Fatty Tang. These people's fleshly bodies were all tempered in this place. And his physical body lacked this kind of tempering. In addition, he found that the power of his flying sword was not strong enough. Just like before, although his flying sword could break through the defense of Fatty Tang, it was not fatal. The power of the flying sword needed to become stronger. 2 hours later, Yi Xian's body recovered. He looked at the war army. Is there a place to cultivate here? The war army shook his head. No, as he said that, he looked at Yi Xian. Do you want to find a place where there is no one? Yi Xian nodded. The war army thought for a moment and then said, 100 miles east of the inner city, there is a mountain range. It is very quiet there. You can go there to cultivate. Yi Xian nodded. Understood. After saying that, he got up and walked outside. As if he thought of something, he bent his finger and a storage ring fell in front of the war army. There were 100,000 purple source crystals in the storage ring. The war army was stunned and was about to speak. At this moment, Yi Xian had disappeared. The war army shook his head with a smile and looked at Baldy. This guy, as he said that, he seemed to think of something and said seriously, Baldy, do you think Brother Yi did his best just now? Baldy glanced at the war army. Are you talking nonsense? He and Fatty Tang didn't do their best. The war army chuckled. Tell me, Who do you think is stronger between the two of them? Baldy was silent. The war army said softly, it said that swordsman is extremely strong. I didn't believe it before, but now that I see Brother Yi, I think there's nothing wrong with what they say. When I think of the battle between Yi Xian and Fatty Tang, the sword energy that filled the sky makes my scalp tingle. Baldy also nodded slightly. In the battle between Yi Xian and Fatty Tang, the sword energy crisscrossed, and Yi Xian's sword was too fast, so fast that not many people could dodge it. After a moment, Baldy said in a deep voice, "Work hard." Zhang Jun also nodded. In this place, everyone could feel an enormous pressure. Because the people around them were better than the other. Yi Xian left the Great Wall and headed east. After a while, he saw the mountain range that the war army mentioned. After entering the mountain range, Yi Xian glanced around. Finally, he came to a dense forest and found an open space to sit down. At that moment, the scene of a Gui beating him appeared in his mind. At first, he thought that a Gui was fast, but in the end, he found that a Gui was not only fast, but also seemed to know what move he was going to make next. Awareness. Yi Xian knew that this was combat awareness. Only those who had experienced countless battles of life and death could have such a strong combat awareness. He came from Qingcheng and had experienced countless battles in his life, but obviously, compared to people like a Gui, he was still too far behind. Not to mention a Gui, he couldn't even compare to the war army, Fatty Tang, and Baldy. Cultivate. Yi Xian took a deep breath. A moment later, energy swords appeared in front of him. At first, there were only 3, but as time went by, more and more energy swords appeared. In less than a quarter of an hour, there were 30 energy swords around him. A moment later, Yi Xian clasped his hands together. Fuse. As soon as he said that, the 30 energy swords suddenly fused and condensed into a super energy sword. At that moment, Yi Xian's face instantly turned pale. At that moment, Yi Xian slashed forward with both hands. Swoosh. The super energy sword slashed straight down. Boom. The ground in front of Yi Xian directly cracked. Yi Xian shook his head. The power had increased, but not too much. Moreover, the consumption was too high, and the time needed to condense the sword was too long. If he were to fight against an enemy, his opponent would not give him so much time. Yi Xian sat on the spot and pondered for a long time. About an hour later, he suddenly stood up. The next moment, an energy sword appeared in front of him. Soon, the energy sword became smaller and smaller, and in the end, it was only the size of a finger. As the energy sword became smaller and smaller, the space around it began to crack. Chapter 452. Seeing this, Yi Xian was overjoyed. This meant that his method was feasible. After condensing the sword qi, not only would it be stronger, it would also be faster. At least twice as fast. Now, his sword qi could no longer be described as a sword qi, but a sword needle. The sword qi was like a needle, unpredictable and unpredictable. Yi Xian did not stop, because the sword needle could become stronger, and its speed could also become faster. Just like that, Yi Xian tried again and again. As he condensed his sword qi, his sword needle became smaller, as thin as a cow's hair, so thin that it was hard to see it with the naked eye. Not only that, the sword needle's speed became faster, so fast that he could only sense it through the space Dao law. High space realm. He was now in the high space realm, and above the high space realm was the divine union realm. The divine union realm referred to the perfect fusion of the soul and the physical body. The divine union realm referred to mental energy, while the soul naturally referred to the soul. He had once reached the divine union realm, but he didn't have a good understanding of this realm, especially regarding the soul. Even now, he still didn't understand the soul. However, he knew that Dao Yi's soul was definitely stronger than the average person's. This was because he had absorbed the souls of the experts from the Realm Protection Alliance that the plain-dressed woman had killed. Moreover, he had devoured quite a number of souls through the Netherworld meditation ring. Therefore, his current soul should be pretty good. What he needed to do now was to unearth the potential of his soul and mental energy, to achieve the true divine union realm. Yi Xian didn't know who created these realms, or how they came about. However, he knew that the person who created these realms wasn't a simple person. Moreover, if one could reach the limit of each of these realms, it would be extremely terrifying. However, people's footsteps were always too fast. Very few people had their feet firmly planted on the ground, taking one step at a time. This included him in the past. Just like the sword Dao. He had completely forgotten about the sword Dao and the sword Dao. Now, he only wanted to take each step well and not think about the future. It was enough to take each step carefully. Yi Xian sat down cross-legged, calmed his breathing and focused his mind. Feel your spiritual power. Mind power was a form of divine sense. In a battle, most of the time, one would have to rely on divine sense. This was because some people were too fast for the naked eye to see. At that time, one would need to use divine sense to scan. But he relied on his willpower to control his sword, and willpower was a part of his mental strength. Simply put, if he could cultivate the divine combination stage to the extreme, his flying sword would definitely become faster. Furthermore, the soul could also be cultivated. At that time, he might be able to borrow the help of his soul power to make his flying sword even stronger, or perhaps even more bizarre. Break through to the divine combination realm. Yi Xian decided to start with mental power. That was because mental power was simpler and he had more experience with it. Soon, Yi Xian's divine sense began to spread out in all directions. Under the perception of the divine sense, everything in the surroundings was clearly visible. However, there was a problem, and that was that it consumed a lot of spirit sense. This was especially true when riding on a sword. Every time he rode on a sword, it would consume a lot of energy. What he needed to do now was to study how to reduce this consumption. Not only that, but he also needed to make his sword faster and stronger. Everything was for the flying sword to be faster and stronger. What he wanted was the kind of person who would kill as soon as he drew his sword. Something that could be solved with one sword was best not to use two swords. Therefore, what he wanted to do now was to properly cultivate a flying sword that was purely condensed from qi. Yi Xian sat cross-legged on the ground. The surroundings were extremely quiet. After an unknown period of time, a needle sword as thin as a cow's hair suddenly appeared in front of Yi Xian. A needle sword as thin as a cow's hair appeared. This needle sword began to move slowly, and not long after, leaves began to fall from the dense forest in the field. It was very quiet, and the leaves fell silently. Just like that, half a month later. In this half a month, Yi Xian did not take a step out of the dense forest, and no one came to disturb him during this time. In the dense forest, Yi Xian was still sitting cross-legged on the ground like an old monk in meditation. After an unknown period of time, Yi Xian suddenly opened his eyes. Not far away, a figure appeared. The person who came was the war army. Yi Xian slowly stood up. 2,000 feet away, in a place where the two of them could not see, a leaf fell quietly. At the same time, an almost invisible sword light flashed quietly. In front of Yi Xian, the war army glanced at Yi Xian. Did I disturb you? Yi Xian smiled and said, no. The war army nodded slightly. I came to you this time because I have something to discuss. Yi Xian was puzzled. What's the matter? The war army nodded. I just got the news that there was no news from Fatty Tang and the others after they entered the death swamp. Yi Xian asked, what did Mr. Bai say? The war army said in a deep voice, Mr. Bai asked us to go. Yi Xian said softly, then something must have happened. The war army nodded. I didn't want to disturb you at first, but now, there are not enough people. Moreover, my intuition tells me that this time the matter is not simple, so I can only look for you. Yi Xian smiled and said, it's right to look for me. Let's go. After saying that, he patted the war army on the shoulder and walked into the distance. In the same place, the war army smiled and followed. He knew that Yi Xian had already regarded him and Baldi as friends. Soon, Yi Xian and Baldi returned to the Great Wall. In a stone house, in addition to the war army and Baldi, Yi Xian also saw 3 people, 2 men and 1 woman, and the 3 of them looked similar. Baldi looked at Yi Xian and introduced, "These 3 are Tang Mu, Tang Lin, and Tang Sen, the 3 siblings." Yi Xian cupped his fists at the 3 of them, and the 3 of them also returned the gesture. As for Yi Xian, although they did not know him before, they had heard that he was a swordsman who could fight against Fatty Tang. Baldi said in a deep voice, "Mr. Bai asked us to go to the Death Swamp. There is no doubt that something happened to Fatty Tang and the others. And Mr. Bai did not make a move. Obviously, this has something to do with the Mok clan. If I'm not wrong, Mr. Bai has begun to gather all the people outside." Speaking of this, he paused and then said, "The Mok clan should be up to something." As Baldi's voice fell, Yi Xian found that the faces of the people around him became a little serious. The war army suddenly said, "Let's go. I hope Fatty Tang and the others can hold on." Soon, the group left the Great Wall and went straight to the Death Swamp. On the way, Yi Xian asked, "What are Fatty Tang and the others doing in the Death Swamp?" The war army said in a deep voice, "They should be hunting demon beasts." At the Great Wall, in addition to fighting against the geniuses of the Mok clan, we also have to fight with these demon beasts every day. These demon beasts grew up in the mountains, and their combat ability is very strong. Fighting with them is also a great improvement for us. The Mok clan is the same, and Fatty Tang and the others should have encountered the Mok clan. The Mok clan. Yi Xian nodded slightly. He did not know much about this clan. Although he had encountered the ghoul and the man in green before, he did not know the overall strength of the Mok clan. At this time, Baldi looked at Yi Xian, "Brother Yi, if you encounter them later, do not underestimate them." "Of course," Yi Xian said with a smile. With that, the group sped up. Soon, the group arrived at a swamp, and there were demon beasts wriggling in the swamp. "Don't get entangled with these demon beasts," Baldi said. With that, he leaped and disappeared at the end of the horizon. Yi Xian and the others quickly followed. Soon, the group arrived at the end of the Death Swamp. At the end of the Death Swamp was a grassland. On the grassland, Yi Xian and the others saw Fatty Tang and the others. There were a total of 5 people, and all 5 of them were on the verge of death. Especially Fatty Tang, both of his arms were chopped off. At this time, Fatty Tang suddenly opened his eyes. When he saw Baldi and the others, he roared, "Let's go." However, as soon as his voice fell, a cold light flashed at an extremely fast speed. In the blink of an eye, Fatty Tang's head flew out. At the same time, the remaining 4 heads flew out in an instant. Blood gushed out like a fountain. Seeing this scene, the faces of War Army and the others instantly turned ferocious. War Army rushed out, but the next moment, he instantly retreated nearly 100 feet. In front of Yi Xian and the others, 2 people appeared. They were the Heaven Fiend and Earth Fiend that Yi Xian met that day. The Heaven Fiend was burly, and the Earth Fiend was wearing a black robe with his hands hidden in his sleeves. Seeing these 2 people, the faces of Baldi and the others suddenly changed. These 2 people were the most terrifying existences in the Mok clan. At this time, a voice sounded from the side, "Is Yi Xian here?" "Yi Xian?" Yi Xian frowned slightly. The other party was looking for him. Everyone looked over and saw a man in green walking slowly from the right. He was looking for Yi Xian. Baldi and the others looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian was silent. He did not know why they were looking for him, but according to his guess, it might be related to the treasure in his body. The man in green walked in front of Yi Xian and the others. "You're not here?" Yi Xian said, "I am." The eyes of the man in green and the other 2 fell on Yi Xian. The man in green shook his head slightly. "So it's you. If I had known this would happen, I wouldn't have let you go that day." Yi Xian said, "You want me? Why did you kill them?" The man in green smiled. Are you joking with me? Yi Xian slowly clenched his right hand. The man in green smiled and said, not kill them? If the people of the Moke clan fall into your hands, will you let them live? Yi Xian nodded slightly. I'm stupid. Asking such a stupid question. As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly drew his sword and slashed. Drawing the sword to determine life and death. As the sword slashed down, the man in green shook his head and smiled. You don't have the right to fight with me. As soon as he finished speaking, he had already retreated 100 feet away. Meanwhile, that Tian Sha appeared in front of Yi Xian. The next moment, that Tian Sha threw a punch at Yi Xian's sword. Boom! With a punch, Yi Xian instantly retreated 100 feet away. In the process of his retreat, the space was directly shattered. Just as Yi Xian stopped, that Tian Sha originally wanted to continue attacking. At this moment, he suddenly turned around. Not far away, the man in green's right arm had disappeared unknowingly, and blood was spurting out like a fountain. Baldy and the others were stunned. The man in green looked at the broken arm on the ground. He opened his palm, and a ball of green light suddenly flashed. The next moment, under everyone's gaze, his right arm directly grew out. The man in green lifted his head and looked at Yi Xian, who was not far away. He said softly, I take back what I said just now. You have the right to fight with me. Yi Xian was silent for a moment, then he looked at Baldy and the others. You guys leave first. Baldy was stunned, then he said angrily, Brother Yi, what nonsense are you saying? How can we leave you here alone? You. Yi Xian suddenly interrupted Baldy's words, Big brother, I'm asking you to go back and find reinforcements. I can't King defeat these three. Everyone. P.S. Ask for tickets. Chapter 453. He couldn't beat them. With just one exchange, Yi Xian knew that none of the three people in front of him was weaker than him. It was impossible for him to beat these three people. Especially the man in green shirt. He originally wanted to kill him by surprise, but he didn't expect the other party to avoid his fatal sword. Not only that, but he could also instantly recover his arm that was cut off by him. It was too terrifying. Yi Xian knew that they couldn't beat these three people. If he didn't leave, once he was pinned down, the war army and others might all be killed. Leave? At this moment, the man in green shirt not far away chuckled, Can you leave? As his voice fell, he was about to make a move, but at this moment, his eyes suddenly narrowed and he turned sideways. Everyone in the field looked at the man in green shirt, puzzled. After a moment of silence, a drop of blood slowly flowed out from the tip of the man in green shirt's nose. Seeing this scene, everyone looked at Yi Xian not far away. When did he make a move? Except for the man in green shirt and the other two, the war army didn't know when Yi Xian made a move. In front of Yi Xian, Tian Sha was about to make a move when the man in green shirt suddenly said, Let me do it. Tian Sha stopped and retreated to the side. The man in green shirt walked to Yi Xian, Your sword is very fast. Yi Xian did not reply to the azure-robed man. He looked at Zhang Jun and the bald man beside him and transmitted his voice using Xian Qi. If you don't want me to die, leave immediately. I'll have a better chance of surviving if I'm alone. Baldy and the war army looked at each other and shook their heads the next moment. Baldy said in a deep voice, Brother Yi, if we leave, you will die faster. As for reinforcements, I believe someone is already here. The war army also nodded, Brother Yi, you fight the most powerful one. Leave the rest of Tian Sha and Di Sha to us. I have long wanted to experience the Moke clan's Tian Sha and Di Sha, haha. Yi Xian fell silent for a moment before he said, Watch out. As he spoke, he looked at the green-robed man. Why? Does the Moke clan want that treasure too? The green-robed man laughed and said, Yes. As soon as he finished speaking, he disappeared. The moment the green-robed man disappeared, Yi Xian's tightly clenched fist suddenly opened. In an instant, boom! An explosion suddenly rang out, and the two figures retreated rapidly. But soon, the two of them disappeared again. Both of them were too fast, so fast that everyone could only see their afterimages. The most frightening thing was that the battle between the two of them didn't make any noise. Everything was so silent. It was too terrifying. Not far away, Tian Sha and Di Sha did not make a move. Both of them were watching the green-robed man and Yi Xian fight. The war army and the others didn't make a move either. All they had to do now was wait for the people from the Great Wall of Heaven to arrive. One had to know that the three people in front of them were definitely the strongest in the Mok clan. On their side, there was only Yi Xian. Xue Bai and Zhou Xingxing didn't come. Under such circumstances, if they made the first move, they would definitely suffer a great loss. At this moment, not far away, Yi Xian and the green-robed man suddenly separated. The two of them were about 10 feet apart. The moment their feet touched the ground, the green-robed man pointed his finger upwards. Rise! As soon as he said that, countless withered vines under Yi Xian's feet suddenly seemed to come alive and spread toward Yi Xian. At this moment, a ray of sword light suddenly flashed from the tip of Yi Xian's finger. The next moment, the withered vines around Yi Xian cracked inch by inch. However, these withered vines seemed to be endless. Soon, Yi Xian was surrounded by these withered vines. However, those withered vines couldn't get close to Yi Xian because his sword was very fast. Therefore, before those withered vines could get close to him, they were all cut by him. However, he couldn't cut all these withered vines. For a moment, there was a stalemate. At this moment, the green-robed man suddenly opened his palm and slowly closed his eyes. After a moment of silence, his right hand suddenly closed. Myriad Wind Blade. As soon as he said that, there was a sudden change in the surroundings. In an instant, countless wind blades flew toward Yi Xian, who was surrounded by the withered vines like a storm. These wind blades were invisible and did not clash with the withered vines. Instead, they directly penetrated the space and arrived in front of Yi Xian. Seeing this scene, the faces of the war army who were not far away suddenly became solemn. And in the middle of the withered vines, Yi Xian's expression also became solemn. What kind of method was this? Not daring to be careless, Yi Xian opened his right hand and the fairy spirit sword appeared in his hand. The next moment, he stomped his right foot and his whole body rushed forward. Everywhere he passed, the withered vines cracked inch by inch. At the same time, around Yi Xian, two imperceptible qi swords quickly shuttled back and forth. Because their speed was too fast, a huge sword-light shield appeared around Yi Xian. It was these two qi swords that blocked all the wind blades. Seeing Yi Xian slashing with the sword, the green-robed man's expression didn't change. He suddenly put his hands together and the ground under his feet began to tremble violently. The next moment, he said softly, "Mother Earth armor." As his voice fell, the power of the earth gathered quietly. In an instant, a thick golden round shield appeared in front of him, and this golden shield just happened to block Yi Xian's sword. At this moment, a yellow light quietly condensed between Yi Xian's eyebrows. The next moment, Yi Xian held the sword and spun violently, and the golden round shield suddenly shattered. In front of Yi Xian, the green-robed man frowned slightly, and there was a trace of surprise in his eyes. Qi! Yi Xian's sword pierced through the green-robed man's chest, but his face sank. Because the green-robed man was already dozens of feet away. The green-robed man looked at Yi Xian and was about to speak, but his expression changed slightly. He dodged sideways, but it was still a little too late. A ray of sword light pierced through his shoulder. The green-robed man's entire right arm fell quietly, but there was no blood. Not only that, but that arm didn't fall to the ground, and his right shoulder grew another arm. Seeing this scene, the expressions of the war army and the others not far away suddenly turned ugly. Is this the body of immortality? Yi Xian's expression also became a little solemn. This green-robed man was really a little strange. The green-robed man looked at Yi Xian and smiled slightly, again. As his voice fell, he opened his palm, and a flame suddenly appeared in his palm. This flame was eerie white, and it was a little strange. With the appearance of this flame, the surrounding temperature instantly became hot, and not only that, the surroundings began to spontaneously combust. The green-robed man looked at Yi Xian. This is the undead flame, ranked 6th in the heaven and earth strange item list. Come, let's see if your sword can break it. As his voice fell, he put his hands together, and the flame suddenly turned into a fire sword. The next moment, this fire sword directly shot towards Yi Xian. Wherever the flame passed, the space was directly burned. Seeing this scene, the war army and the others hurriedly looked at Yi Xian with a trace of worry in their eyes. In the distance, Yi Xian opened his palm, and a sword appeared in his hand. Soul-suppressing sword. Yi Xian held the sword and stabbed forward. The sword stabbed out, and the tips of the two swords collided. In an instant, the flame sword trembled violently, and then flew back. At the same time, the green-robed man's face suddenly changed in the distance, and he retreated hundreds of feet away. He stared at Yi Xian. What is that? The war army and the others were dumbfounded. Yi Xian was silent, and his heart was extremely heavy. Just now, he had already used the split soul of the soul-suppressing sword, but it failed. Failed? Yi Xian asked in his heart, Soul, why did you fail? Soul, why did you fail? After a moment of silence, Soul said, Young lord, this person has a special physique, and his soul and body are particularly strange. I can't split his soul. Special physique. Yi Xian's brows furrowed slightly. What special physique? Soul said in a deep voice, In this world, there are some people who are blessed by heaven. They have special physiques and have many peculiarities. This person in front of me has a special physique. However, I don't know what physique he has, but what I can be sure of is that I can't separate his soul from his body. Young lord, be careful. Special physique. Yi Xian looked up at the green-robed man not far away, and the green-robed man was also looking at him at this moment, and there was a trace of fear in the green-robed man's eyes. The green-robed man stared at Yi Xian. What sword is that in your hand? Yi Xian smiled and said, A killing sword. As his voice fell, he suddenly disappeared. The next moment, the green-robed man's pupils shrank slightly, and soon, his right hand slammed the ground in front of him. Bang! The ground beneath their feet instantly shattered, and then the green-robed man suddenly leaped up and smashed his fist towards Yi Xian. His fist was like a torrential river, and the space in front of him was instantly blasted apart. At the same time, a powerful force from his fist instantly forced Yi Xian to a stop. The green-robed man had chosen to meet Yi Xian's attack head-on. As soon as the sword in his fist appeared. Bang! An explosion resounded like a thunderclap, and then both of them retreated explosively. However, while Yi Xian was retreating, a strand of sword light had soundlessly arrived in front of the green-robed man. The green-robed man hadn't seen the strand of sword light, but he'd sensed it. The green-robed man suddenly crossed his arms, and then he suddenly swept them horizontally. Bang! The strand of sword light exploded into pieces, but the green-robed man was pushed 300 m back. Moreover, countless scars had appeared on his arms. But in next to no time, these scars silently vanished, and his arms returned to normal. Yi Xian's face instantly fell when he witnessed this scene. Is he really unkillable? The expressions of the war army were quite unsightly as well. This green-robed man is truly too terrifying. The green-robed man raised his head to look at Yi Xian, and then he stretched out his right hand. In the next moment, a saber condensed into form in his hand. The nearby heavenly Shah and earthly Shah exchanged glances when they witnessed this scene, and there was a trace of seriousness in their eyes. Because they knew that the man who stood before them very rarely used his saber. The green-robed man held the saber tightly in his right hand and spun it lightly. In an instant, a sharp sound of space being torn apart resounded. In the next moment, the green-robed man suddenly soared into the air. In the sky, countless strands of wind, energy, fire, lightning, origin energy, spatial energy, earth energy, soul energy, spiritual energy, and energy of darkness suddenly converged into the saber in his hand. At this moment, the surrounding space began to tremble violently as if it was about to collapse. It was incomparably frightening. In the sky, the green-robed man suddenly laughed. He looked down at Yi Xian below. Yi Xian, do you dare to take this saber of mine? Below, Yi Xian raised his head to look at the green-robed man. At this moment, a voice rang in his mind, retreat. It was Mr. Bai's voice. Retreat? Yi Xian was a little confused. His intuition told him that he could not take this saber. He might die. If he took a step back, there were infinite possibilities. If he did not retreat, he would die. The place suddenly became quiet. After a moment, Yi Xian suddenly said softly, if there is no one else, I will retreat. There are so many people here, I can't afford to lose face like this. As his voice fell, he raised his head to look at the green-robed man. Come and fight. As his voice fell, there was a sudden change. Chapter 454. Come and fight. His voice was like a bell that shook the heavens and earth. As Yi Xian's voice fell, a powerful sword essence suddenly swept out from Yi Xian's body. The sword essence was like an erupting volcano that shot into the sky and shook the heavens. Fight. Die. Yi Xian was afraid of death and he did not want to die. However, compared to death, he did not want to be a coward. A man could be poor and powerless, but he could not be without dignity and courage. If his opponent was an old monster and he, Yi Xian, could not defeat him, he would turn around and run without hesitation. However, his opponent was a young man of the same age as him. He did not want to retreat. If he retreated, the man in green would become Yi Xian's inner demon. Fight. When had he, Yi Xian, ever been afraid of anyone? Sensing Yi Xian's fighting spirit, the sword soul suddenly trembled violently. At the same time, a voice rang in Yi Xian's head, I am willing to fight with young master. Yi Xian laughed and looked up at the man in green in the sky, come. As soon as he said that, he stomped his right foot. Boom! The ground cracked and Yi Xian turned into a sword light that shot into the sky. In the sky, after sensing Yi Xian's sword essence, the man in green did not retreat. Instead, he laughed loudly, come and fight to your heart's content. As soon as he said that, he held the sword with both hands and slashed down from above his head. Swoosh! The world seemed to be split open by this slash and a huge hole appeared in the sky. At this moment, Yi Xian's sword arrived. At this moment, there was only one thought in his mind, and that was to fight. Fight. When this was the only thought left in his mind, even Yi Xian himself did not realize how powerful his draw the sword to decide life and death was. When the sword slashed out, it seemed to split the sky. In the sky, the sword and the sword faced each other. Boom! The space in the horizon suddenly trembled, and then it cracked apart. At the same time, both of them were blasted backwards. At the instant that Yi Xian was blasted flying, a strand of imperceptible sword light suddenly flashed through the air. In the distance, the green-robed man suddenly roared. He raised his right hand and slammed it down. Boom! The sky shook again. At this time, Yi Xian had already fallen to the ground. The ground trembled and Yi Xian coughed up a mouthful of blood. Not far away, the green-robed man was also lying on the ground. However, there was an endless amount of spiritual energy gathering around him. This spiritual energy was frantically healing his body. Seeing this scene, the faces of the war army and the others suddenly became ugly. They all looked at Yi Xian. At this time, Yi Xian started fighting. Heavy injuries. This time, he was seriously injured and didn't want to move. However, he was very clear that the other party had a special physique and could recover faster than him. If this continued, he would definitely die. Therefore, he had to continue fighting. No one had the chance to heal. Yi Xian stood up. This chapter is not finished. Please continue to the next page. After arriving, he held his sword and walked towards the green-robed man. He walked very slowly, but the murderous intent on his body was extremely fierce. Not far away, Tian Sha and Di Sha did not make a move either. At this time, if the war army and the others did not make a move, they would definitely not make a move. The Mok clan and Never-Ending Star region had fought countless times. They basically did not use any tricks because both sides disdained to play dirty. Especially the Mok clan. In their clan, if two people were to fight one-on-one and someone interfered, it would be a great humiliation to the person who was fighting one-on-one. Now, Yi Xian and the green-robed man were fighting one-on-one. Therefore, as long as the war army and the others did not make a move, they would definitely not make a move, even if Yi Xian killed the green-robed man. Similarly, the war army and the others would not make a move. They could die, but they could not lose face. At this time, the green-robed man not far away also slowly stood up. The azure-robed man walked towards Yi Xian. Around him, countless spirit auras continued to gather towards him. The green-robed man glanced at Yi Xian and disappeared the next moment. When he reappeared, he was already in front of Yi Xian. At this time, Yi Xian did not dodge and allowed the green-robed man to hit his chest. Bang! Yi Xian flew out directly. However, the moment Yi Xian flew out, a sword beam pierced through the green-robed man's chest. The green-robed man retreated rapidly, retreating a full 1,000 feet. After he stopped, he looked down at his chest. Blood slowly flowed out from his abdomen. The green-robed man took a deep breath. He looked at Yi Xian not far away and said softly, "Your sword is really too fast." In the distance, Yi Xian slowly got up again and continued to walk towards the green-robed man. He still wanted to fight? Seeing this scene, the war army and the others felt their scalp tingle. The reason why they were so shocked was that Yi Xian's body was full of injuries at this time and his whole body was bleeding. And it was very strenuous for him to walk, especially strenuous, as if he would fall down with the next step. However, he still wanted to fight. Yi Xian carried the soul-subduing sword and walked towards the green-robed man. There was only one thought in his mind now. Fight. When he was in Qingsheng, he had experienced countless life and death battles. At that time, he understood one truth. To be a person, one must be kind to others, but when it comes to evil, one must be ruthless and desperate. Because you are not ruthless enough and desperate enough, the one who dies will definitely be you. Seeing Yi Xian walking over with the sword, the green-robed man's face was calm. He slowly clenched his hands and in the next moment, he stomped his right foot. Boom! The ground instantly cracked. With the powerful push of the ground, the green-robed man rushed out directly, but in the process, blood overflowed from his mouth like a spring. He was a little better than Yi Xian now, but only by a little. Therefore, he must do his best to kill Yi Xian in one blow. Only in this way could he survive. This was his last blow. In the distance, Yi Xian suddenly stopped and was silent for a moment. This chapter is not over, please turn the page. Then, the sword slashed down. This sword was also his last sword. The sword stabbed out. Chi! There was a tearing sound. Soon, the green-robed man arrived and punched at Yi Xian's sword. In his fist, there was a powerful fist force. Boom! The two collided and separated. Yi Xian and the green-robed man flew backward toward each other, but the moment Yi Xian flew out, another ray of sword light directly pierced the green-robed man's eyebrows. Seeing this scene, the war army and the others who were not far away suddenly felt nervous. This time, the green-robed man should be dead, right? Under the gaze of the war army and the others, the green-robed man suddenly became illusory, but after a while, he returned to normal, but he fell straight down. However, he was still not dead. The green-robed man lay on the ground, panting. His body trembled, and he kept muttering, "Good, fast, sword, he's not dead yet." Seeing this scene, the faces of the war army and the others became extremely gloomy. Is this an immortal body? As if thinking of something, the war army and the others looked at Yi Xian. At this moment, Yi Xian was also lying on the ground, and Yi Xian was still breathing, but it was very weak. Terrible. Yi Xian's body was full of cracks, and blood had already seeped into the ground under him. The scene became very quiet. Sky Fiend and Earth Fiend on the side did not make a move. The two just looked at the green-robed man on the ground. The war army and the others were staring at Yi Xian. After about a quarter of an hour, on the ground, Yi Xian suddenly moved. Seeing this scene, Sky Fiend and Earth Fiend's eyelids twitched not far away. Is this a cockroach that can't be killed? Under everyone's gaze, Yi Xian slowly got up. Just as he was about to walk toward the green-robed man not far away, a voice suddenly sounded from the field, "Enough. I'll do the rest." Everyone looked in the direction of the voice. Not far behind Yi Xian, a man was walking over slowly. The man wore a blue gown, tight trousers, and carried an iron spear on his back. His hair was tied into a ponytail, and the tail was tied with a long black rope. Seeing this person, the war army and the others suddenly breathed a sigh of relief. Zhou Xingxing. Zhou Xingxing walked to Yi Xian's side. He glanced at Yi Xian and then flicked his finger. A pure white snow lotus fell in front of Yi Xian. "Holy lotus, it can heal quickly." Yi Xian did not stand on ceremony and directly took the snow lotus. Zhou Xingxing patted Yi Xian's shoulder lightly. "Heal. Leave the rest to me." With that said, he walked toward Sky Fiend and Earth Fiend not far away. P.S. People have to fight to live. I'm definitely not fighting for a young model. In fact, until now, I still don't dare to be careless. I don't dare to be arrogant. Maybe it's because of my sense of responsibility, or maybe it's because I'm poor. It's still very difficult not to forget my original intention. When I started writing books, it was just a simple hobby to earn some pocket money. Now that I'm writing books, I actually want to get rich every day. I want to have health care. Can I still be saved? End of this chapter. Chapter 455. Healing. Now, Yi Xian didn't think about anything else. He just wanted to have a good rest. It was too tiring. This time, he really felt exhausted. He didn't even have the strength to move a finger. It could be said that this battle was the most enjoyable battle he had ever had. Carefree and unrestrained. This time, he had a lot of insights, but at the same time, he realized that there were too many shortcomings. If he didn't fight with a real powerhouse, no matter how much he cultivated, it would be limited. He couldn't build a car behind closed doors. However, at this moment, he didn't want to think so much. He just wanted to lie down. Not far away, Zhou Xingxing walked in front of the man in green shirt. At this time, Sky Sha and Earth Sha appeared on both sides of the man in green shirt. Zhou Xingxing glanced at the man in green shirt. "Monsieur?" The man in green shirt smiled slightly. "I'm sorry to disappoint you." "I'm not." Zhou Xingxing was silent. After a moment, Zhou Xingxing said softly, "What a pity." The man in green shirt smiled and said, "Unfortunately, you can't fight with him?" Zhou Xingxing nodded. The man in green shirt smiled lightly. "You should be glad." Zhou Xingxing said calmly, "Is that so?" The man in green shirt smiled and didn't say anything else. He slowly closed his eyes. Zhou Xingxing looked at Sky Sha and Earth Sha. "Who's next?" Sky Sha stood up. Soon, Earth Sha brought the man in green shirt to one side, and the war army and the others quickly brought Yi Xian to the other side. Sky Sha didn't say any nonsense. He rushed forward and threw a punch at Zhou Xingxing. The powerful fist force was like a stormy sea, making it hard for people to breathe. Zhou Xingxing was expressionless. He took out the iron spear behind him with his right hand. The next moment, he rushed forward and stabbed with the spear. The spear was like a dragon. Boom! The two of them separated as soon as they touched, but soon, the two of them collided again. The second battle began. On the side, Yi Xian lay quietly on the ground. Now, his mind was filled with the scene of the battle with the man in green shirt. On the other side, in a place where no one could see, Mr. Bai stood quietly on a leaf. Behind him was a Gui. Mr. Bai's gaze was fixed on Yi Xian. At this time, a Gui suddenly said, "He is a promising talent, but his edge is too sharp. It would be better if he could be more reserved." Mr. Bai laughed. "It's rare to catch a Gui's eye." A Gui said in a low voice, "Before this, I thought he was just lucky and had that precious treasure. That's why he was able to come this far. But just now, this person has the guts and determination to fight without fear of death. I like it." Mr. Bai smiled and said, "Then will you train him?" A Gui shook his head. "I'm not suitable for him." Mr. Bai shook his head. "You are suitable." A Gui looked at Mr. Bai. Mr. Bai said softly, "His sword Dao is not the mainstream sword Dao. His flying sword was more suitable to be used as an assassin. It was more suitable for killing. His sword Dao can be combined with your killing Dao." A Gui was silent. Mr. Bai said again, "He still has many areas to improve, but he can't see it himself. Or rather, what he can see is limited. With your guidance, he can become stronger." A Gui nodded. "I understand. But why don't you teach him yourself, sir?" Mr. Bai said softly, "His temperament is not compatible with mine. I'm afraid I'll kill him." A Gui was speechless. In the distance, the battle continued. Tian Sha and Zhou Xingxing could be said to be evenly matched. Neither had the upper hand. This time, both sides chose to fight one-on-one. Therefore, the war army and the others did not make a move. Not long after, a voice sounded from afar. "Stand down." As this voice appeared, Tian Sha suddenly stopped and retreated to Di Sha's side. As this voice appeared, Tian Sha suddenly stopped and retreated to Di Sha's side. Everyone looked over. 1,000 feet away, a man stood there. The man was wearing a plain robe with his right hand behind his back. He had an elegant scholar's aura. And beside the man, a black Qilin crouched. Seeing this person, Zhou Xingxing frowned. "Emosia?" The plain-robed man did not answer Zhou Xingxing. He looked up into the distance. On the other side, Mr. Bai frowned slightly because the plain-robed man was looking at him. The plain-robed man smiled. "You must be the famous Mr. Bai." Mr. Bai took a step forward. When this step landed, he was already in front of the plain-robed man and the others. Mr. Bai looked at the plain-robed man. Soon, he frowned again because he could not see through the man in front of him. The plain-robed man smiled. "Rumor has it that Mr. Bai fought his way to my Mok clan's gate and almost broke through my Mok clan. I have admired you for a long time." Mr. Bai said indifferently, "You are Mok clan's Mo. The plain-robed man nodded. "Yes." Mr. Bai looked at the black Qilin beside Mo. At this moment, the black Qilin suddenly raised its head and looked at Mr. Bai. Its eyes were filled with hostility and it was about to rush towards Mr. Bai. At this time, Mo. patted the black Qilin's head lightly. The latter immediately climbed down. Mr. Bai looked deeply at Mo. Black Qilin is an ancient demon beast from the foreign land. It specializes in killing. It actually recognized you as its master. Mo. smiled. "I am friends with it." As he spoke, he looked at Yi Xian who was lying on the ground not far away and said softly, "Is he the Yi Xian who has the supreme treasure?" As he spoke, he looked at the green-robed man on the ground. To be able to fight with Sua Qing like this, he is amazing. Mr. Bai looked at Imo Xia for a long time. Finally, he turned around and left. Back to the Great Wall. The war army and the others hurriedly carried Yi Xian and followed. Zhou Xingxing was a little unwilling, but in the end, he chose not to disobey Mr. Bai. At this time, Imo Xia suddenly said, "Mr. Bai." Mr. Bai stopped in his tracks. Imo Xia smiled. "The Moke clan will not fail this time. No one can stop us." Mr. Bai said calmly, "I'll wait for you." With that, he disappeared. In the distance, Imo Xia looked at the man named Zhua Qing on the ground. "Are you all right?" Zhua Qing said softly, "I'm all right. That person's sword is so fast." Imo Xia nodded slightly. "Even you can't dodge it." "Naturally, it's very fast." As he spoke, he looked at Tian Sha and Di Sha. "If you encounter this person in the future, be careful." The two nodded. Tian Sha hesitated for a moment and then said, "Big brother, when are we going to the Great Wall of Burial Skies?" Imo Xia smiled. "There's no hurry. The Moke clan has been waiting for 1,000 years. A little longer doesn't matter." Tian Sha nodded and said no more. At this time, an old man suddenly appeared beside Imo Xia. The old man said, "Young master, this time, some people from the alien domain suddenly came to this star sector. Their target might be that swordsman. And they don't want to go head-on against the never-ending star sector, so they want to temporarily ally with the Moke clan. However, their target is only that swordsman." Imo Xia said softly, "How are the people who came?" The old man said in a low voice, "Two of them are equivalent to Tian Sha and Di Sha, and one." Imo Xia looked at the old man. The old man said softly, "I'm afraid they are only second to you, young master." Imo Xia smiled slightly. "Interesting." As he spoke, he looked at the end of the horizon and said softly, "That Weiyang Palace Lord is still very strong. These people from the alien domain are still very wary of her." Weiyang Palace Lord. Hearing this, the old man's face suddenly turned serious. Only the experts of the older generation understood how terrifying this woman was. At this time, Imo Xia said softly, "Let's go. Let's go meet those geniuses from the alien domain." With that, he turned and left. On the other side, Mr. Bai suddenly said, "Ask Shui Bai to come back." Agui quietly left. Burial Sky Great Wall. Yi Xian lay in the stone house. After consuming the snow lotus that Zhou Xingxing gave him, his body began to recover rapidly. Yi Xian said softly, "Second floor guru, are you there?" After a moment of silence, the second floor guru said, "What's up?" Yi Xian smiled bitterly. "Before this, I thought I was invincible among my peers." Before this, he had rarely encountered opponents of the same level. The only one who could possibly be an opponent was Enlancio. And Enlancio also seemed to have a special physique. Yi Ling also had a special physique. At this time, the second floor guru suddenly said, "No one is invincible among their peers. You have to remember that in the vast universe, there is no strongest, only stronger." Yi Xian nodded. "Understood." The second floor guru said again, "Compared to the person you fought, the man who appeared later was really terrifying. This person is outstanding even among the Divine Clan and Nether Clan." Yi Xian frowned slightly. "That man in plain robe?" The second floor guru said, "Well, if you meet this person in the future, you better be careful." Yi Xian nodded slightly. He now had a taste of the strength of the Moke clan. However, he did not have the slightest fear. On the contrary, this stimulated his fighting spirit. There were countless geniuses, and he, Yi Xian, wanted to occupy a place among them. The second floor guru said again, "And that black Qilin beside him, it is a rare ancient beast. This kind of beast eats evil thoughts and devours hearts. Its bloodline is not inferior to the emperor dog. Very strong. Very strong." Yi Xian was silent for a moment. After a moment, he seemed to think of something and asked, "Second floor guru, what about you? What bloodline do you have?" He did not forget that this second floor guru was also a demonic beast. The second floor guru said, "When did I tell you that I am a demonic beast?" Yi Xian was stunned. "Aren't you a demonic beast?" The second floor guru said, "Get lost." Yi Xian was speechless. At this time, a black shadow suddenly appeared in the stone house. Yi Xian quickly stood up. This person was a Gui. A Gui said, "My Tao is the Tao of killing, the Tao of ghosts. Are you willing to learn from me?" Yi Xian was stunned. A Gui asked again, "Are you not willing?" Yi Xian came to himself and said hurriedly, "Yes." A Gui nodded slightly. "Follow me." After that, he left the stone house with Yi Xian. After a while, a Gui brought Yi Xian to a mountain range. A Gui said, "Do you know your weakness?" Yi Xian shook his head. A Gui said, "Attack me." Yi Xian hesitated for a moment, then said, "This isn't too good." Then, he suddenly put two fingers on his right hand together. The next moment, a ray of sword light quietly appeared in front of a Gui. Chi! The sound of air being pierced was heard. A Gui appeared behind Yi Xian and grabbed Yi Xian's shoulder with one hand. Yi Xian was instantly immobilized. At this time, a Gui lifted Yi Xian and slammed him to the ground. Bang! The ground cracked. Yi Xian was speechless. Chapter 456. Bam Bam. A Gui raised Yi Xian and smashed him around, leaving craters in the ground. Yi Xian was lying on the ground in a second. A Gui was standing not far from him. A Gui said, "Let me teach you a lesson. Don't play tricks in front of a true expert. Of course, it's not that you can't play tricks, but strength is the key. Without strength, all tricks are useless. Do you understand?" Yi Xian smiled bitterly. "Actually, I'm a reasonable person. If you have anything to say, you can tell me. I'll listen." A Gui shook his head, "Suffer a little pain, and you'll learn from it." Yi Xian was speechless. A Gui said, "Get up." Yi Xian stood up quickly. He didn't want to be beaten. A Gui said, "You're a swordsman. My Tao is different from yours, but you can learn from some of my advantages. Now, attack me." Yi Xian didn't dare to underestimate him. He rushed forward and slashed down. "Draw the sword to decide life and death." The sword slashed down, and the space shook. However, the sword was caught by two fingers. Yi Xian's face darkened. A Gui said, "The essence of this sword is strong, but in your hands, it's weak. Do you know why?" Yi Xian shook his head. A Gui said, "When you fought with the man in green, the sword's power was at least several times stronger than now. Do you know why?" Yi Xian said, "If I couldn't take it, I would have died. So, I tried my best." A Gui said, "Not only that, your sword had courage, determination, and fighting spirit. But now, your sword has nothing." Yi Xian was silent. A Gui said, "Your sword has great potential, but it depends on whether you can unleash it. Come, continue to attack now. Treat me as your enemy." "Enemy." Yi Xian nodded slightly and sheathed his sword. After a moment of silence, he drew his sword and slashed. "Draw the sword to decide life and death." The sword descended, but it was still easily caught by a Gui. Yi Xian shook his head. "I can't." A Gui was silent for a moment, then he said softly, "I understand." Yi Xian looked at a Gui, and a Gui said softly, "The power of your sword depends on your rage. The angrier you are, the more you want to kill, the more powerful your sword will be. Normally, the power of this sword is inferior to that of your flying sword. It should be said that the difference is huge." Yi Xian fell silent. Actually, he had also discovered this problem. This was because this sword was sometimes especially strong, and sometimes it didn't seem very strong. Ague said, your sword has a high upper limit and endless potential, but it's related to your rage, so it's useless most of the time. Yi Xian was speechless. Ague said, let's talk about your flying sword. Your flying sword is fast enough, and it's strong enough. Yi Xian quickly said, Senior, do you think my flying sword is strong enough? Ague said, do you think it's strong? Yi Xian hesitated, then he said, I think it's okay. Ague hooked his finger, come, hit me. Yi Xian was speechless. Ague said, strength, speed, your flying sword is okay, barely qualified. But what you lack now is awareness, combat awareness. Also, because of your sword, your close combat ability is weak. If your opponent fights you in close combat, you will be at a disadvantage. Disadvantage in close combat. Yi Xian smiled bitterly. Before this, he always thought he was strong in close combat. However, from the previous battle, he knew he was not good enough in close combat, especially the sword skill, life and death sword draw. Its power was related to his rage, it was too unstable. Ague said, treat me as an enemy. Come, continue. Yi Xian nodded, then he charged at Ague with his sword. When he reached in front of Ague, he swung his sword down. The sword was fast, but Ague was faster. Before the sword landed, Ague was already behind Yi Xian. Chi! Yi Xian's sword missed. Ague was already behind Yi Xian. Yi Xian said, you're faster than me. Ague appeared in front of Yi Xian. Is that all? Yi Xian looked at Ague, Senior, please enlighten me. Ague said, first, the moment you came, your movement told me you were going to attack. In that instant, I had already thought of several ways to deal with it. Second, you're not as fast as me. Yi Xian was speechless. Ague said, before you're faster than him, it's best not to let him know what you're going to do. For example, your flying sword could hurt the man in green because Wuqing didn't know when you were going to attack. Then, he looked at Yi Xian, what you need to do now is, after you attack, what's your next step? Next step. Yi Xian was silent. At that moment, he understood Ague's meaning. What Ghosty meant was to look 3 steps before taking 1 step, or even 10 steps before taking them. Ague said, come, continue. Yi Xian nodded, and once again, he drew his sword. In the following time, Yi Xian and Ague started a crazy sparring session. During the sparring session, Yi Xian was getting more and more worried because Ague seemed to know what he was going to do next. For the first time, he felt like he was completely suppressed. Only when he used the flying sword could he recover a little. However, after using the flying sword, he was still suppressed. At night, Ague said, think about it yourself. After saying that, he turned around and disappeared. On the ground, Yi Xian lay quietly. His mind was filled with the battle with Ague. Ague didn't use any sword skills, he just used pure strength, speed, and consciousness to suppress him. Especially his battle consciousness. At that moment, he really saw how terrifying Ague was. This ghosty was definitely someone who had experienced countless life and death battles. His opponent's battle consciousness was too terrifying. This time, Yi Xian realized his problem. In terms of martial arts and swordsmanship, he was still a greenhorn. Yi Xian took a deep breath, stood up, and started to practice his swordsmanship. He practiced according to the images in his mind. On the other side, where Yi Xian couldn't see, Mr. Bai was looking at him, and behind Mr. Bai was Ague. Ague said, he only lacks the improvement in battle. As for his swordsmanship, I can't guide him in other aspects. Mr. Bai said softly, this is enough. After saying that, he turned around and left. Ague followed. On the way, Mr. Bai said, where's Bai? Ague said, I've informed him, he's on his way back. Mr. Bai nodded, the palace master and the others will be here soon. Ague said in a deep voice, is the Moke clan planning something big? Mr. Bai said softly, they can't wait any longer. Ague said softly, "All right, let's put an end to this." As he spoke, he paused slightly, and then said, "The people from the other side are still eyeing that brat. These people from the other side aren't prepared to let the matter rest." Mr. Bai said, "There are still people spying on us?" Ague nodded, "A few." Mr. Bai said, "Kill them." Ague nodded, and quietly left. Mr. Bai glanced at Yi Xian in the distance, and then left. After dawn, Yi Xian quietly lay on the ground. After a night of practice, he found that he had learned a lot, especially in terms of battle. In particular, sparring with Ghosty had allowed him to understand many things, especially the finer details. Apart from that, he also gained something, the flying sword. After sparring with Ague, he knew better when it was best to use his flying sword. The timing of the sword was very important. All in all, this battle with the man in green and the practice with Ague had helped him improve. Yi Xian was about to continue practicing, when suddenly, a voice came from the prison pagoda. "Brother, brother." Yi Xian was stunned, and in the next moment, he entered the prison pagoda. Inside the pagoda, Yi Xian saw Yi Ling, and Yi Ling threw herself into Yi Xian's arms, hugging Yi Xian tightly. Feeling the tears on his chest, Yi Xian smiled, but soon, the smile turned into tears. Yi Ling. She was the most important person in his life. At this moment, Soul's voice suddenly sounded, "Young lord, she is still very weak, she must enter my body to recuperate for a while, in case there is a problem with her soul in the future." Yi Xian hurriedly looked at the sword Soul. "She has not fully recovered?" Soul said, "Yes, her soul is still a little weak, she needs to recuperate." Yi Xian nodded, and then looked at Yi Ling. Yi Ling grinned, "Brother, it's good to see you." Yi Xian gently wiped the tears on Yi Ling's face. "This time, I promise you, I will never let you get hurt again." Yi Ling said softly, "Brother, I want to become strong, very strong." Saying so, she looked at Yi Xian, "We brother and sister want to become strong together, okay?" Yi Xian smiled, "Of course." After chatting with Yi Ling for a while, he forced Yi Ling to enter the soul-suppressing sword, because he found that Yi Ling's face began to pale. The situation was not good. After Yi Ling entered the soul-suppressing sword, Yi Xian continued to cultivate. "Sister. I must protect my sister. And to protect my sister, I must have great strength. Become strong. Cultivate like crazy." In the vast starry sky, a ray of sword light passed through. Wrapped in the sword light was a sword, this sword shuttling through the endless starry sky. It was shuttling through the starry sky, so the star field it crossed was very large. After an unknown amount of time, the sword suddenly stopped, turned around, and changed direction. The next moment, it was already at the end of the starry sky. After a while, it came in front of a black hole. It directly entered the strange black hole, and when it reappeared, it was already in another star field. In the starry sky, a swordsman in a white robe seemed to sense something. He stopped. Chapter 457. As soon as the middle-aged man turned around, a sword appeared in front of him. Seeing the sword, the middle-aged man was slightly surprised. "It's you?" The sword trembled slightly as if it was asking something. The middle-aged man shook his head. "I haven't seen her." The sword trembled and let out a low hum. The middle-aged man asked, "Why the rush?" The sword trembled as if it was trying to express something. A moment later, the middle-aged man said softly, "That tower." As he spoke, he pondered for a moment. After a while, he said softly, "Go find her." The sword did not leave. Instead, it stayed where it was. The middle-aged man smiled. "I'll take care of the tower." Hearing that, the sword turned around and disappeared at the end of the Milky Way. On the spot, the middle-aged man turned around and looked at the end of the Milky Way. At the end of the Milky Way, he saw a galaxy bridge that spanned across the Milky Way. At the end of the bridge, there were a few extremely powerful auras. After a moment of silence, the middle-aged man disappeared. At the same time, a voice resounded on the distant galaxy bridge. Does anyone want to fight? Burial Sky Great Wall. Between the mountains, a series of air-piercing sounds could be heard. Yi Xian was still training with a Gui. During this period of time, he had been training with a Gui every day. A Gui did not teach him anything and only sparred with him. During this period of time, he could be said to have improved by leaps and bounds. Especially his close combat ability. His reaction speed was at least twice as strong as before. It did not matter, because if his reaction was slow or his moves were stupid, he would be beaten up by a Gui. Meanwhile, a Gui's fists were like iron hammers. Every punch could make him wish he was dead. Under such circumstances, his improvement was naturally very fast. Because he could not make the same mistake twice. Otherwise, he would be beaten up even worse. To Yi Xian, he was in pain and happy at the same time. Because he could clearly feel that he was changing, especially in terms of combat. When to draw his sword, when to retreat, when to advance. Just like that, half a month later. On this morning, a Gui arrived before Yi Xian once more. Yi Xian suddenly drew his sword, and a strand of light silently flashed at the instant he drew his sword. At this time, a Gui suddenly disappeared in front of him. When she appeared again, she was behind him. However, at this moment, the sword that Yi Xian was about to slash forward suddenly turned around and slashed downward. It should be said that his sword was meant to slash backwards. The sword slashed down. Bang! With a muffled sound, an afterimage appeared several feet away. It was a Gui. A Gui whispered, "A diversion." Not bad. Yi Xian grinned and was about to speak when a Gui suddenly disappeared. Bang! Yi Xian was sent flying hundreds of feet away before crashing heavily onto a boulder. A Gui walked before Yi Xian. Did I make you relax? Yi Xian was speechless. A Gui whispered, "Remember, in this place, you must always be on guard. Also, be prepared to be killed." Yi Xian slowly got up and whispered, "Senior, is the Moke clan going to do something?" A Gui nodded. During this time, many people from Neverending Starfield will come here. You have to be prepared because the Moke clan might be up to something big. Yi Xian nodded slightly. Okay. A Gui turned around and left. On the spot, Yi Xian sat cross-legged and took out a fruit. It was a kiwi fruit. He had robbed it from the war army and Baldi. After coming here, because of the Fatty Tang incident, the three of them had almost forgotten about it. Strengthen the body. His body had been tempered by the dragon blood, so it was very good. However, compared to the people here, especially the war army and the others, there was still a gap. Compared to Tian Sha, the gap was huge. Now, he had to do everything he could to improve his strength in all aspects. Yi Xian swallowed the kiwi fruit. Soon, a pure energy began to spread from his body. Soon, this energy was quickly absorbed by his body. Comfortable. This was how he felt now. But soon, this comfortable feeling turned into heat, as if there was a fire burning. Time passed little by little. About 4 hours later, Yi Xian stood up. At this moment, all of his clothes had been reduced to ashes. Yi Xian looked down at his body. At this moment, his skin had undergone some wonderful changes. It worked. Yi Xian was delighted. He took out another kiwi fruit and swallowed it. He did not swallow all of it. After all, some of it belonged to the war army and Baldi. While Yi Xian swallowed the kiwi fruit, outside Buried Sky City, a man suddenly came to the city. The man was wearing a long cloth robe and held a long saber in his right hand. After arriving at the city, he looked up at Buried Sky Great Wall and stomped his right foot. Boom! The ground shook violently. At the same time, a voice suddenly sounded like thunder. Yi Xian, come out and fight. Yi Xian. Soon, the entire Buried Sky Great Wall shook. The war army and the others all appeared on the city wall. Yi Xian. In the field, everyone glanced around and did not see Yi Xian. The war army said, "I'll go find him." After saying that, he turned around and disappeared not far away. The Moke clan and Neverending Starfield often challenged each other, and both sides had always followed this rule, which was to fight one-on-one. When two people fought one-on-one, no one could intervene. All these years, neither side had broken the rule. They would not break the rule either, because both sides had their own pride. Of course, if they felt that they could not win, they could choose not to go down. Not long after, the war army brought Yi Xian to the city wall. Yi Xian looked down. He did not know the man below, and this man was not the man in the green robe from the Moke clan or the Heaven Fiend and Earth Fiend. He might not be from the Moke clan. Yi Xian guessed. At that moment, the war army beside him said in a low voice, "Brother Yi, you can choose not to go down, but I still suggest that you go down. All these years, whenever the Moke clan came to challenge us, we never backed down." At that moment, the man below suddenly looked up at Yi Xian. He gave Yi Xian a thumbs up, but the next moment, the thumbs turned downward. Yi Xian's figure trembled, and he appeared in front of the man. The man slowly clenched his right hand, and a powerful aura suddenly swept out from his body. Sage Realm. The man grinned and was about to attack, but at that moment, Yi Xian suddenly said, "What a powerful aura. I have never encountered such a powerful aura. You are definitely not from the Moke clan. The Moke clan would not have such a monstrous genius like you." Hearing that, the man was stunned, and then he laughed, "You guessed right. I am not from the Moke clan, I am." At that moment, the man's face changed, and he suddenly put his hands together in front of him. Boom! An explosion suddenly rang out. As soon as the explosion resounded, the surroundings suddenly fell silent. Not far away, Yi Xian turned and left. Behind Yi Xian, blood slowly flowed out from the man's brow. The man stared at Yi Xian. "You. Are you playing with fire?" As soon as he said that, he fell straight down. The surroundings were silent. He died just like that. Yi Xian returned to the city wall, and the war army's throat rolled. "Brother Yi." Yi Xian smiled slightly, and he flicked his finger, and a storage ring fell in front of the war army. "This is the kiwi fruit, yours and Baldy's are inside." After that, he turned and left. The war army took the storage ring, and he glanced at the man's body below, still unable to recover. Not to mention the war army, even the important people on the city wall had not recovered. Because until now, they did not know when Yi Xian made his move. On the other side, on the city wall, Mr. Bai looked down quietly. "You taught him?" Behind Mr. Bai, a Gui was silent for a moment, and then said, "How could I know such a dirty trick?" Mr. Bai shook his head slightly. "It's different from the swordsman I have seen." A Gui was speechless. At this time, Mr. Bai said again, "The people from the foreign lands have joined forces with the Moke clan." A Gui nodded. "The geniuses from the foreign lands have entered the Moke clan, and from the looks of it, their target is that kid." Mr. Bai said softly, "The people from the foreign lands don't follow the rules. You should pay attention during this time, in case they do something desperate." A Gui nodded, and quietly retreated. After a Gui left, Mr. Bai hesitated for a moment, and then turned and disappeared not far away. In the mountains, Yi Xian, who was practicing his sword, suddenly turned around, and not far from him, Mr. Bai stood quietly. Yi Xian quickly bowed slightly. "Greetings, Mr. Bai." For the person in front of him, he still respected him, because if it was not for him, he might have died in the hands of that group of strong people. Mr. Bai nodded slightly. "I noticed, you are in the levitation state." Yi Xian nodded. Mr. Bai said softly, "Your real state is not the levitation state. Are you cultivating backwards?" Yi Xian said, "Yes." Mr. Bai asked, "Why?" Yi Xian said, "Because I realized that I have not fully understood every state." Mr. Bai took a deep look at Yi Xian. "Did someone tell you this, or did you discover it yourself?" Yi Xian said, "I discovered it myself." Mr. Bai said softly, "Walk with me." As he spoke, he turned around and walked not far away. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment, and then followed. On the way, Mr. Bai was silent for a moment, and then he said, "The man in green who fought with you earlier is called Zhuqing. He has an innate spiritual body, and he is in the sage state, almost the complete sage state." Yi Xian looked at Mr. Bai. "Innate spiritual body?" Mr. Bai nodded. "It is very difficult to kill." "Do you remember the situation when he used a knife?" Yi Xian said, "I remember." Mr. Bai said, "He gathered all the living things in the world. This is something that only the manifestation state can do, but he did it easily." Yi Xian said in a low voice, "What are you trying to tell me, sir?" Mr. Bai said softly, "You are very outstanding, but there are many people who are equally outstanding, especially the Moke clan. This is a clan that I admire." Yi Xian was stunned. You admire the Moke clan?" Mr. Bai stopped, and only then did Yi Xian realize that they had arrived in front of a tomb. Mr. Bai said, "The person buried inside is a member of the Moke clan." As he spoke, his voice became soft. "That year, Palace Master, Old Gao, and I killed our way into the Moke clan. In that battle, we almost completely destroyed the Moke clan. But the person in the tomb in front of us stopped us. In that battle, he brought the 12 generals of the Moke clan, and the 12 of them, including him, all blew themselves up, one after another." Chapter 458. Self-Destruction. Yi Xian was silent. He felt like a tide was surging in his heart. He hadn't seen the scene, but he could imagine how tragic it must have been in the Moke clan. Mr. Bai said softly, "The most terrifying thing about the Moke clan is that they have faith and courage." Then, he turned to Yi Xian. "This is exactly what the never-ending starfield lacks." Yi Xian hesitated and said, "Sir, allow me to say something childish. Can't we sit down and talk?" Mr. Bai smiled. "Not childish. We thought about it back then. Unfortunately, some things can't be negotiated." Yi Xian was confused. "Why?" Mr. Bai laughed and said, "You have a treasure on you, and some people want your treasure. Do you think you can negotiate with them?" Yi Xian was silent. Mr. Bai continued, "In this world, there are many times when one cannot do as they please. Most of the time, there is no right or wrong, only different standpoints." Then, he took out a wine bottle and poured it in front of the grave. Then, he turned and walked away. Yi Xian followed him. On the way, Mr. Bai said, "Do you know why many powerful forces didn't attack you or rob you of your treasure when you were in the never-ending starfield?" Yi Xian shook his head. Mr. Bai said softly, "The palace lord suppressed those forces. She asked you to come here to protect you. She was also afraid that you would stir up conflict between the forces in Never-Ending City." "Palace lord?" Yi Xian said, "I don't know her." Mr. Bai smiled. "Maybe she knows you." Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. "Maybe." Mr. Bai continued walking while Yi Xian followed slowly. After a while, Mr. Bai stopped and smiled. "I almost forgot." As he spoke, he pointed at a large tree that was 300 meters away. "From here to there, 300 meters, 300 meters. Let me see how fast your sword is." Yi Xian thought for a moment. Then, he put his fingers together. A leaf fell from the tree 1,000 feet away. Mr. Bai said softly, "The extreme of qi, the extreme of space. Your sword is indeed fast among your peers, but it's not enough. You can be faster." Yi Xian bowed. "Please enlighten me, sir." Mr. Bai said, "Soul." Then he looked at Yi Xian. Above that is the divine soul level. This level focuses on the soul and mind energy. You have just come into contact with these two kinds of energy. You haven't fully grasped them yet, have you? Yi Xian nodded. He was impressed. Mr. Bai saw through him with one look. He had just started to study the divine soul and mind power. Mr. Bai chuckled. Zhua Qing's talent might not be higher than yours, but there's something you don't have. When he's cultivating, there's always someone from the Moke tribe who'll help him clear up his doubts. Take the divine soul for example. An ordinary person might need 3 to 4 years to understand it. However, they only need 1 day to be guided. He suddenly pressed one hand on Yi Xian's shoulder as soon as he finished speaking. Then he lifted Yi Xian up slightly. Yi Xian's soul was separated from his body directly. Yi Xian, who had become a soul, was stunned. He panicked because he realized that he had no power at all. Mr. Bai said softly, under normal circumstances, a human soul is very fragile. It can't leave the body easily. Otherwise, the soul will be destroyed by the various energies in this world. However, you are special because your soul is unusually strong. Yi Xian looked at Mr. Bai. Sir, after my soul is separated from my body, Mr. Bai said, your soul is still your soul. You are still you. Your ability hasn't disappeared. If you don't believe me, you can try. Yi Xian nodded and opened his palm. Soon, a sort of energy quietly condensed in his palm. In the next moment, he opened his palm and the sword of energy suddenly disappeared. 100 feet away, the tree was pierced by a ray of sword light. However, it was a little slow. Yi Xian looked at Mr. Bai. Mr. Bai said softly, you are only using your soul and mind power now. Therefore, the speed of your sword is not as fast as when your body and soul are fused. What you need to do now is to properly cultivate your soul power and spiritual power, and cultivate them separately. Because if they are not separated, your body can be said to be a kind of restriction for them. Yi Xian said softly, I understand. Mr. Bai said, don't worry and cultivate. No one will disturb you here. With that, he turned and left. Yi Xian began to cultivate where he was. After Mr. Bai walked to the other side, a Gui appeared behind him. A Gui said in a low voice, Sir, you want to nurture him? Mr. Bai nodded. Although Zhou Xingxing is not weaker than Zhua Qing, he needs to deal with Tian Sha and Di Sha. As for Zhua Qing, he can only come. A Gui said, that Mosya, Mr. Bai said softly, I can't see through this person. A Gui said in a low voice, what are the chances of Bai Yi winning against him? Mr. Bai said, 40%, maybe even lower. A Gui's face changed slightly. Why? Mr. Bai said, because he has an evil Kirin with him. This beast eats evil thoughts and devours people's hearts. Its combat power is not weaker than a manifestation realm expert. Moreover, this beast is still in its infancy. If it grows up and becomes an adult, as he said, he shook his head. I don't know how he tamed this beast. A Gui was silent. At this time, Mr. Bai said, if she is still here, a Gui was silent. She was the most monstrous existence in the Great Wall of Burial Sky. Even the painter was in awe of her and wanted to take her as his disciple. Unfortunately, don't worry too much. Trust Bai Yi. With that, he turned and left. A Gui turned and looked at Yi Xian who was still practicing his sword. Why do I trust this kid more? As he said, he shook his head and turned to leave. In the distance, Yi Xian began to use his soul to cultivate crazily. After his soul was separated from his body, he found that there was indeed something different. That was, his divine sense and mental strength were much stronger than when he had a physical body. However, his overall strength was not as strong as when he had a body. Only his soul and spiritual power were stronger. Moreover, when he did not have a body, he always felt empty and a little unsteady. As he practiced, a thought suddenly appeared in Yi Xian's mind. He suddenly opened his right hand and the next moment, the soul-quelling sword appeared in his hand. The moment he held the soul-quelling sword, Yi Xian suddenly felt as if he had taken a tranquilizer. His whole body was extremely calm. Not only that, but he also felt that there was a continuous flow of soul power from the soul-quelling sword in his hand towards him. Yi Xian hurriedly asked, Little soul, this is? Little soul said, "Young master, this is the soul power that I devoured. This soul power can be used by young master." Hearing this, Yi Xian was stunned. What did this mean? It meant that he had a continuous flow of soul power to devour. And by devouring this soul power, his soul could become stronger. Meanwhile, little soul said, "Young master, it's best that you don't absorb too much. These souls aren't pure souls. If you absorb too much, then young master might develop negative emotions. In other words, your personality will split. At that time, the situation will become very serious." Yi Xian asked, "How serious?" Little soul fell silent for a moment and then said, "It might cause young master to have multiple personalities and thoughts." Hearing this, Yi Xian's expression became serious. Little soul said, "Of course, it's fine as long as young master doesn't absorb them without restraint. With young master's current realm and strength, he can absorb 10,000 souls at most. After he absorbs these souls, young master's soul power will become even stronger. Besides that, if young master holds me in his soul form, then he'll be able to bring forth my strength better. However, if he doesn't have a body to rely on, then young master's soul power won't be very strong." Alas, this is a contradiction. Yi Xian fell silent for a moment, and then he said, "Is there a perfect way?" Little soul said, "There is. When young master's soul has been cultivated to a certain extent, then it would be as strong as his body, and they would attain a perfect balance. Unfortunately, young master's current state is utterly insufficient to accomplish this." Yi Xian said softly, "How would I know if I don't try?" As soon as he finished speaking, Yi Xian started to devour the souls within the sword soul. Most of these souls were once his enemies, so he didn't feel guilty at all when he absorbed them. As Yi Xian absorbed the souls in a steady stream, Yi Xian felt his soul start to undergo a subtle change. Around 2 hours later, little soul's voice suddenly resounded. "Young master, it's done." Yi Xian hurriedly stopped, and then he greedily took a deep breath. The feeling of devouring souls was truly too wonderful. He wanted to continue absorbing, but he forcefully stopped himself from doing so. People often died because of their own greed. Yi Xian stood up, and then he swiftly slashed forward with the soul-suppressing sword in his hand. The sword slashed down, and space was instantly torn apart like paper. As if he'd thought of something, Yi Xian leaped up and slashed down with his sword. One strike to fix the soul. This was the sword skill that the woman in the plain dress had taught him. This sword fell without a sound, without any movement at all. Yi Xian was stunned. Little soul said softly, "This sword is so strong." Yi Xian's face darkened. "Little soul, you're mocking me again." Little soul said, "Young master, you're wrong. Don't look at how your sword doesn't move at all. That's because your sword only targets the soul. If there was a person in front of you, then your sword plus my uniqueness can fix that person's soul with one strike. This sword only injures the soul and not the body. This sword skill and I are simply a match made in heaven. Even if it's a creation realm expert, if that expert isn't fully vigilant beforehand, then that expert's soul would be directly fixed by young master's sword." Yi Xian was stunned, and then he said, "It's that formidable?" Little soul said, "Very formidable. The person who created this sword skill is definitely much, much more formidable than young master." Yi Xian hurriedly said, "Stop, stop, stop, stop. Let's not discuss this." Little soul was speechless. A short moment later, Yi Xian started to cultivate. This time, he didn't just cultivate his soul, but his body and soul at the same time. Thus, a strange scene appeared. Yi Xian's soul fused with his body at times, and then separated at other times. At this moment, Yi Xian didn't seem like a single person, but two people. P.S. I ran into something today. A brat was madly ringing the doorbell of each building. When I went downstairs, his mother was next to me. His mother didn't care. I said that her child was ringing the doorbell randomly. She said a few words to the child and continued to play with her phone. After I went back to my room to write, the F***ck rang again. With my bad temper, I went down and pointed at the brat and yelled at him. The brat was so scared that he cried. His mother said to me that he was still a child and asked me why I was so angry. In the past, I'd only seen this kind of thing on the internet, but it was the first time I'd encountered it in person. Chapter 459. Under the moonlight, Yi Xian quietly cultivated alone. After he started cultivating his soul, Yi Xian discovered the true strength of little soul. The destructive power of little soul to the soul was too great. Especially with his soul-setting sword, he was confident that he could kill a manifestation realm cultivator instantly. Of course, he would not underestimate anyone. The more Yi Xian practiced, the more excited he became. He discovered that the separation and combination of the soul and the body had many wonderful uses. For example, when he drew his sword, his soul suddenly left his body. Originally, it was his body that attacked, but he could instantly attack with his soul. Under such circumstances, he could catch his opponent off guard. Of course, there was also a problem. After his soul left his body, he had to be careful that his body would be destroyed. Therefore, he had to be faster. He had to beat his opponent until they could not fight back. Fast. This was his core. Just like that, the days passed. Half a month later, more and more experts came to the Great Wall of Burial Sky. They were all from the never-ending starfield. Besides them, there was another person who came. That was Duge Xian. In the mountains, when she saw Yi Xian, a smile appeared on Duge Xian's face. Yi Xian walked up to Duge Xian and smiled. Mother. The knot in his heart had long been untied. He only had 2 family members left in this world. One was his sister, and the other was the woman in front of him. He did not want to hurt anyone because of his willfulness, especially his family. Duge Xian gently stroked Yi Xian's cheek and said softly, "You must have suffered a lot, right?" Yi Xian smiled. "It's nothing." Duge Xian smiled and said softly, "Ling, she," Yi Xian said, "Ling, is fine. She is now cultivating her soul in my sword." Duge Xian nodded. "I understand. Continue your cultivation." Yi Xian nodded and continued his cultivation. Duge Xian sat on a rock and looked at Yi Xian, who was cultivating in the distance. Her face was full of smiles. She seemed to recall something and her smile gradually faded. She said softly, "Yang, do you see? He's very outstanding." As she spoke, she took out a green jade pendant. Looking at the jade pendant in her hand, her gaze became somewhat dazed. After a long time, Duge Xian put away the jade pendant and said softly, "Where are you?" Duge Xian did not notice that the jade pendant in her hands suddenly trembled. Somewhere on the wall of the Great Wall of Heaven Burial, a woman stood quietly, her long skirt fluttering gently in the mountain breeze. She looked very graceful and graceful. Beside the woman was a middle-aged man. This person was Mr. Bai. Mr. Bai said softly, "The people from the other side have also joined in." The woman looked into the distant horizon. "You came for him?" Mr. Bai nodded. The woman said softly, "How is he?" Mr. Bai said, "Your talent is not bad, and your strength has increased a lot." The woman nodded slightly and looked at the end of the horizon. At the end of the horizon was the Mok clan. Mr. Bai suddenly asked, "What about the painter?" The woman said softly, "Without her, we can still do it." Mr. Bai nodded. "No matter what, it's time to end it." The woman suddenly looked down. Not far away, a man was walking toward the Great Wall of Heaven Burial. Mr. Bai said, "The people from the other side. They should be here for him." The woman nodded slightly. Suddenly, she frowned. Mr. Bai looked at the man below, and soon, he also frowned slightly. Below, the man walked to the bottom of the wall, looked up at the Great Wall of Heaven Burial and smiled. Is Yi Xian here? The voice was not loud, but it seemed to have a magical power. Almost everyone in the Great Wall of Heaven burial heard it. Yi Xian also heard it. On the wall, the woman was expressionless. This person cultivates an ancient secret technique. Mr. Bai nodded. The people from the other side are serious. Soon, many people appeared on the wall. At this time, a figure suddenly jumped down from the city wall. This person was Zhang Jun. Zhang Jun sized up the man. The man was wearing a loose cloud robe, and on the robe, there were some unknown patterns that he could not identify. The man glanced at the war army and shook his head. You're not Yi Xian. The war army said calmly, are you done? You're just going to fight one person? Come, I'll fight you. As soon as he said that, he was about to make a move. At this moment, a voice suddenly came from the side. Let me do it. The war army looked over. Not far away, Yi Xian walked over slowly. The war army nodded. Be careful. With that, he retreated to the side. Yi Xian looked at the man. The man smiled. I heard that your sword is fast. Yi Xian did not waste any time and lightly stomped his right foot. Chi. His entire body turned into a black line and disappeared on the spot. In the distance, the man narrowed his eyes. The next moment, he opened his palm, and a talisman suddenly flew out. The next moment, a golden talisman shield appeared in front of him. At this moment, Yi Xian's sword had just arrived. Boom! The golden talisman shield shook violently, and Yi Xian retreated rapidly. At this moment, the man formed a strange hand seal. The next moment, he pulled his hands to the side. Open the heavenly gate. As soon as his voice fell, boom! In front of Yi Xian, the space suddenly cracked. In an instant, countless dark energy swept out from the cracked space. This dark energy was like a black hole, devouring everything as soon as it came out. In the distance, Yi Xian retreated continuously. After retreating hundreds of feet, he found that the space around him suddenly cracked. Then, countless dark energy flooded towards him. Yi Xian stopped and gently stomped his right foot. Between his brows, the space Tao quietly condensed. The next moment, Yi Xian shouted, "Close!" As soon as his voice fell, the cracked space in the surroundings suddenly healed. Seeing this scene, the man frowned slightly. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly appeared in front of him. The man's pupils shrank, and he chose not to fight head-on. He softly said, "Divine movement." As soon as his voice fell, he directly turned into a beam of light and disappeared. Yi Xian frowned because at this moment, he actually couldn't sense the other party. Suddenly, his expression changed slightly. He turned around and slashed with his sword. Before the sword fell, a palm had already pressed against his chest. Bang! Yi Xian retreated rapidly. At this moment, a beam of light flashed in front of him. So fast. Yi Xian knew that he couldn't dodge at this moment. Immediately, his soul left his body. At this moment, a palm pressed against his chest, but his sword slashed down. Chi! An arm directly flew out. 100 feet away, the man suddenly appeared. At this moment, his face was extremely pale. In the distance, Yi Xian's soul returned to his body. As soon as it returned to his body, a trace of blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. He looked at the man not far away. The other party's speed was too fast. His sword just now was aimed at the other party's head. Unfortunately, the other party was too fast and he only cut off the other party's arm. Somewhere on the city wall, the woman glanced at Yi Xian and said softly, "The separation of the physical body and soul." Interesting. The separation of the physical body and the soul. Interesting. Mr. Bai said softly, "Indeed." The man glanced at Yi Xian. At this moment, there was a trace of seriousness in his eyes. After a moment of silence, he suddenly clenched his left hand. "Qianjun." As soon as his voice fell, he suddenly appeared in front of Yi Xian and blasted out a punch. The punch flew out. Boom! The space around Yi Xian instantly collapsed. What terrifying power! Yi Xian was shocked. He didn't dare to be careless. He suddenly drew his sword. Drawing the sword to determine life and death. The sword slashed down. Bang! Yi Xian instantly retreated 100 feet away. However, he hadn't even stopped when the man appeared in front of him again. After that, the man blasted another punch towards his face. As soon as the punch was thrown out, the space around Yi Xian cracked like a spider web. There was no room for retreat. Yi Xian hadn't thought about retreating. Because he would definitely fall into a passive position if he retreated against someone whose speed far surpassed his. So, Yi Xian chose to fight the man head-on. Yi Xian drew his sword and slashed down. However, his soul suddenly left his body when the sword was about to strike the man's fist. The man's pupils constricted when he saw this, and he hurriedly withdrew his fist. Because a sword had arrived between his eyebrows. The sword was longer than the fist. If he hadn't withdrawn his fist, then he would have been able to blast Yi Xian's body apart with a single punch. However, Yi Xian would be able to pierce through the space between his eyebrows. He didn't choose to fight Yi Xian to the death because it wasn't worth it. He didn't focus on cultivating the soul. If Yi Xian's sword pierced through the space between his eyebrows, then it was very likely that he would die. As for Yi Xian, he would at most lose his body. The man withdrew his fist to block. Bang! The man instantly retreated explosively as soon as Yi Xian's sword slashed down. The woman on the city wall suddenly shook her head. That fellow has lost. What a pity that this ancient secret technique is. Mr. Bai looked down. It was difficult because after Yi Xian pushed him back, Yi Xian's soul had suddenly returned to his body. In the next moment, Yi Xian had appeared in front of the man, and he swung his sword again. The man raised his arm to block again. Bam! The man retreated explosively, but at this moment, Yi Xian appeared in front of him again. Yi Xian suddenly drew his sword. At this moment, the man's expression changed, and he was about to block when a ray of sword light silently appeared behind the man. Chi! The ray of sword light instantly pierced through the man's eyebrows. Then your body will stiffen. Yi Xian appeared in front of the man, and the man glared at Yi Xian. Drawing the sword is fake. The flying sword is real. Yi Xian nodded. Correct. As soon as he finished speaking, he swung his sword horizontally. Chi! The man's head directly flew off, and blood spurted out like a fountain. Seeing this scene, a smile appeared on the faces of the people on the city wall. Yi Xian kept the man's storage ring. In the storage ring, he saw a thick ancient book. On the cover of the ancient book, there were 4 large words, Ancient Secret Technique. Yi Xian kept the storage ring, turned around, and walked into the distance. Seeing this scene, the people on the city wall were stunned. The war army quickly appeared in front of Yi Xian. Brother Yi, what are you going to do? Yi Xian grinned. It's them who come to me every time. It's so boring. This time, I want to find them. The war army was stunned, and then gave a thumbs up. You've got guts. Yi Xian smiled, turned around, and left. But soon, he walked back. The war army was puzzled and asked, Brother Yi, you? Yi Xian said seriously, I forgot to heal my injuries first. I'll go after my injuries are healed. The war army was speechless. You're tuning into the Biyao's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.